letter of appreciation on behalf of my family. I write especially appreciate you, my distinguished colleagues, for the time with me and my family during the celebration of life of my late father, Samuel. Letter from distinguished Senator Comrade Senator Abu Moro, Benue South Senatorial District. The Senate President, notification of wedding, Teresa Onyewu Moro. I write to formally, through you, sir, inform my distinguished colleagues of the wedding of my daughter, Teresa Onyewu Moro, which comes up on Saturday, 5th December 2020. Though wedding notifications have been sent to my individual colleagues, I find it necessary because of the importance the family attaches to your esteemed presence to further inform you that the wedding comes up on Saturday, 5th December 2020 at Holy Name Parish of Bokolo. Accommodation has been reserved at Leach Hotel, almost opposite the residence of the single Senator David Ebimark, President of the 6th and 7th Senates. Bokolo is 1 hour 30 minutes from Nnamdi Azikwe International Airport, Enugu, where vehicles have been provided to convey the single senators and guests. This is the easiest gateway for guests coming by air. While the family and I look forward to receiving you, please, my distinguished colleagues, accept the assurances of my very warm regards. Signed, Senator Abu Moro, Doctor of Letters, FAMN, FCPA, Benue South. Petitions. Senator Barenada Mpigi.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name's Mpigi Barenada. I represent the people of Rivers Southeast Senatorial District. Mr. President, I'm from Rivers State. Mr. President, before me and with me here also is a petition from one Mr. Ambrose Uzi. Mr. Ambrose Uzi is writing on behalf of his friend who is illegally adopted and also kept in a prison in Mozambique. The name of his friend is Chris Inabugo Akuzoroku. Mr. President is alleging that his friend, within the period of lockdown, happened to be a business person who happened to travel from South Africa into Mozambique, and there was a police raid, and his friend was adopted with others, and since that time, all attempts to get in touch with his friend has been proved abortive. But information that filters is that his friend is somehow locked in a prison in Mozambique. Mr. President, if it pleases you, can I lay this petition so that you can direct it to the appropriate committee to look into it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seeking any judicial remedy, you may lay the petition. The petition is referred to the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petitions to report back within 4 weeks. Any petitions? Leader of the Senate. Point of order, Senator George Thompson Sekiwo.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I come under the 10(1) and 2. The quorum of the Senate shall be 1/3 of the members of the Senate. If at any time during the daily session of the Senate, a question is raised by any senator as to the presence of a quorum, the presiding officer shall within 15 minutes forthwith direct the clerk to call the roll and announce the result. And this proceeding shall be without debate. Mr. President, I checked out the call and I had only about 20-something persons as against 36 persons. So I think we will not form a quorum. If there are people in the tea room, they should come and let's form the quorum so that we can start the proceedings and then they can now go out to wherever they want to go to.
Please check the register. Let's hear. Okay, how many people are there registered? That is 35. We are at the moment at 5. So I rule you out of order. Leader of the Senate. Of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the first business of the day is the presentation of an executive bill in my name on the Finance Bill 2020 SB 585. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Finance Bill 2020 SB 585, first reading.
Finance Bill 2020 SB 585, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the second business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Obasani on NDLEA Act Cap N30, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004 Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, NDLEA Act Cap N30 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2020 SB 582, first reading.
NDLE Act Cap N30 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2020 SB 582, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the third business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Ibikunle Amosu on the nationwide toll bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Nationwide Toll Bill 2020, SB 583, first reading.
Nationwide Toll Bill 2020, SB 583, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the fourth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Sani Musa on the FCT Borderline Communities Development Commission Establishment Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, FCT Borderline Communities Development Commission Establishment Bill 2020, SB 584, first reading.
FCT Borderline Communities Development Commission Establishment Bill 2020, SB 584, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the fifth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Michael Opeyemi Bamidele on the National Human Rights Commission Act, Cap N46, 2004, Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, National Human Rights Commission Act, CAF N46, 2004, Repeal and Enactment Bill 2020, SB 586, first reading.
National Human Rights Commission Act, Cap N46, 2004, Repeal and Enactment Bill 2020, SB 586, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, the first order of the day is the second reading of an executive bill standing in my name, that is the Finance Bill 2020. Distinguished colleagues will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber today. In view of the importance of this bill, therefore, and the need to expedite action on its passage, in order to clear the way for us to receive and consider the Appropriation Act, distinguished colleagues, I move that the Senate do suspend Rule 79, subsection 1, in order to read the bill the second time. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, my colleague, for giving me this executive permission. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, please permit me to lead this debate on this very important bill titled Finance Bill 2020. The bill was read the first time in this hallowed chamber on Wednesday, 2nd December 2020. The bill seeks to amend the Capital Gains Tax Act, the Companies Income Tax Act, Personal Income Tax Act, Tertiary Education Trust Fund Establishment Act, Customs and Excise Tariff, etc. Consolidated Act, Value Added Tax Act, Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act, Nigerian Export Processing Zone Act, Oil and Gas Export Free Zone Act, Fiscal Responsibility Act, Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, and Public Procurement Act. These amendments are in order to make further provisions in connection with federal government financial management and public revenue and other relevant matters. Essentially, the objective of the bill has 6 strategic objectives. Number 1 is to adopt appropriate counter-cyclical fiscal policies to respond to the economic and revenue challenges precipitated by the decline in international oil prices, as well as the impact of COVID-19 COVID-19 pandemic on the Nigerian economy. 2, to reform the extant fiscal policies to prioritize job creation, economic growth, socio-economic development, domestic revenue mobilization, as well as to foster closer coordination with monetary and trade policies. 3, to provide fiscal relief for taxpayers by reducing the applicable minimum tax rate for 2 consecutive years of assessment, as well as reforming the commencement and cessation rules for small businesses. 4, propose measures to fund the federal government's COVID-19 pandemic response and introduce provisions to enhance the recovery of corporate donations towards responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as any similar crisis in the future. 5, amend certain aspects of Fiscal Responsibility Act to align this act with the 1999 Constitution as amended, as well as to enhance fiscal efficiencies by controlling the cost-to-revenue ratio of key state and government-owned enterprises. And 6, amend the Public Procurement Act to implement key procurement reforms previously proposed by the National Assembly in 2019 to extend the scope of the Act to the federal judiciary and legislature, accelerate procurement processes, increase mobilization fee thresholds, and provide for essential e-procurement reforms. As such, the 2021 appropriation bill is based on the provisions of this particular bill. The additional revenues will be used to fund health, education, and infrastructure programs. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, this bill seeks to, among other things, amend the following tax provisions and make them more responsive to the tax reform policies of the federal government and enhance its implementation and effectiveness. The Capital Gains Tax Act. This Capital Gains Tax Act is amended at Section 36, subsection 2 of the CGTA to the extent that exemption on tax liability for compensation for loss of office, which was hitherto limited to 10,000 naira, is now extended to 10 million naira. There is a new Section 32 which provides that no tax shall apply to any trade or business transferred to a Nigerian company for the purposes of better organization for that trade or business. This tax exemption is, however, not applicable if the acquiring company subsequently disposes the assets within 1 year of acquiring sale. Personal Income Tax Act. Section 49 of the Personal Income Tax Act has been amended to make provision for tax identification number mandatory for persons intending to open a new bank account for purposes of business operations or for continuation of operation of such bank account. In other words, the mandatory requirement for tax identification number is for accounts being operated for purposes of business transactions. Value-added tax. Section 4 of the Value-added Tax Act has been amended by increasing the value-added tax payable by consumers from 5% to 7.5%. Section 19 increased the penalty payable by a taxable person for non-remittance within the specified period from 5% to 10%. Under Section 28, the penalty for failure to give notice of change of address or permanent cessation of business was increased from 5,000 naira to 50,000 naira in the first month and 25,000 naira to 25,000 naira in subsequent months. There is a new Section 8 on the VAT Act to cater for the registration of a taxable person upon commencement of business. The penalty for failure to register has been increased from 10,000 naira to 50,000 naira in the first month and 5,000 naira to 25,000 naira in subsequent months. However, the time within which a taxable person is required to register with the service is not specified under the new law, as the law simply hinged the time upon commencement of business. This is somehow ambiguous and may be subject for court interpretation. The new Section 15 of VAT introduces a threshold for VAT compliance. Thus, companies with turnover of 25 million or more shall render their tax on or before 31st of every month. 21st of every month. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, it is absolutely essential to intensify the revenue generation efforts of this administration and its commitment to ensuring that the inconvenience associated with any fiscal policy adjustment is moderated, such that the poor and the vulnerable who are most at risk do not bear the brunt of those reforms. It is imperative that the Nigerian tax legislation is updated frequently to respond to the challenges of today's business environment, which therefore underscores the importance of the Finance Bill 2020. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, the Finance Bill is intended to support the funding of the 2021 budget. The Finance Bill contains several long-awaited changes to the tax framework, which seeks to address issues of low tax revenue growth, such as an increase in VAT rate and the introduction of tighter deductibility rules. In view of the global economic and tax trends, the Finance Bill seeks to modernize the Nigerian tax system by incorporating recommendations of the OECD, that is Organization of Economic Development and Cooperation, on taxation of the digital economy and profits earned by non-resident companies. These proposals have been recommended for global adoption in recognition of the impact of globalization and technology, whereby trade flows increasingly transcend traditional and formal frameworks. Nigeria will thus be one of the few early adopters of globally relevant tools for tracking and harnessing tax revenue from economic activities that occur within our fiscal community and within our national territory. Furthermore, the Finance Bill seeks to provide a boost to small and medium-scale enterprises by reducing their tax burden. It also seeks to replace existing tax incentives with more targeted incentives to stimulate economic activity in the capital market and infrastructure sectors. Finally, the Finance Bill will amend several numerous tax provisions which have impeded investment in Nigeria, such as the complex insurance tax rules and the excess and interim dividend tax rules that limit the dividend available for distribution to shareholders as contained in the Companies and Income Tax Acts. Overall, the provisions contained in the Finance Bill are intended to incentivize economic activities, stimulate GDP growth, and facilitate increase in the revenue generated by the government. If the Nigerian government is determined to generate sufficient revenue to finance its numerous projects and meet the sustainable development goals of eradicating poverty from the country, it is important for the government to take pragmatic steps. Such steps should include devising ingenious methods of expanding the tax base and collecting taxes effectively. Tax education and sensitization of the public will go a long way in achieving compliance from taxpayers. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, this bill will transform our economic fortunes, and I therefore call on government agencies, corporations, ministerial departments, and agencies to be loyal, disciplined, and judiciously utilize public funds derived from this amendment. They should provide infrastructural facilities needed to improve the economic activities of Nigerians and thus improve our gross domestic product. Government should make deliberate efforts to widen economic activities to enhance improved standard of living, because the standard of living is improved with higher per capita income. Government should maintain close surveillance on the VATable persons to enhance prompt remittance of VAT revenue and submission of VAT invoice for proper tax audit by Federal Inland Revenue Services to ensure adherence to tax laws as at when due. In addition, the Federal Inland Revenue Service should put in place structures to plug revenue leakages and ensure transparency in the appropriation of VAT funds. This will largely help in boosting taxpayers' confidence. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I believe that this bill is tailored to meet the critical needs of this country at this point of our democratic evolution and in this very dire economic situation. All these are targeted at making Nigeria move to the next level of economic and social development, and also enable us get out of the current COVID-induced recession as quickly as possible. I therefore urge you, my distinguished colleagues, to support the second reading of this bill and it's committed to the relevant committee for further detailed consideration. I so submit, Mr. President.
Senator Sumata.
Your Excellency, I arise to support some of the highlights of this bill. I'm sure none of us is in doubt that more than ever before, this is the time for us to expand our revenue nets so that government can be able to finance some of the challenges of infrastructural development. Not just infrastructural development, but development of the people and the nation. Mr. President, I took a look at some of the details so far given in this presentation. And I want to say, Mr. President, that tax, especially established taxes system, is one of the most reliable means of government generating revenue to meet the needs and the aspiration of the people. But in so doing, Mr. President, there are some areas where I think perhaps when we get the details of the bill, deserve serious attention. And there are some of the provisions that I have issues with. Mr. President, in this country, when this government came into power and came with the enforcement of BVN, there are many billions of naira in Nigerian banks today that are idle funds. That these funds are funds that those who own them, those who deposited them, can no longer go there to take this money. They are in trillions. That explains why today, Mr. President, I'm sure you overheard when some large sum of money were discovered to have been buried somewhere. And I think the man died and people were able to expose such resources, such funds. Today, Mr. President, if our nation decides to take a searchlight to Nigerian banks, you see idle funds, some of them that were siphoned, the people are dead. Some of them, the people lack the courage to come out and claim this money. This money are in the banks. The banks are not talking, they are living fat on these resources that belongs to all of us. So I think this bill must take into consideration the fact that we have billions in banks stuck there, stolen Nigerian money. I think there's a need for us to examine those aspects. True, Mr. President, I think one other area that we must emphasize upon is in the area of property tax, Mr. President. There are property tax, there are properties in Nigeria. In Abuja here, you will see many houses completed 10 years ago. There's no nation where you see houses completed 5 years, no tenants, the people don't bother because they are stolen funds. These properties are scattered all over Nigeria. Properties built mansions, nobody owns them, nobody is paying them, no tenants. So I think, Mr. President, these are some of the areas that we must look at in order to recover some of the wealth of our people that have been misappropriated. Apart from this, Mr. President, in a nation where some people cannot eat serious crime meal, there are Nigerians with private jets scattered all over. What happens? What is the tax? What is the proposal of those who own private jets in Nigeria? How much are they paying? There are jets in this country owned by Nigerians, whom some of them you cannot really establish their source of livelihood. I think if we want a change and we want to expand the net, the revenue net of our nation, it must be holistic. Let us look beyond the taxes that we are paying with common people. Those who own private jets in Nigeria should be ready to help the nation now that the nation is bleeding. I think it's one aspect, Mr. President, that we must look into. Again, Mr. President, there's the issue of those who cruise in SUV cars. In some nations, Mr. President, there are taxes for those gas-guzzling vehicles. So let us have taxes for those who own four-wheel drives so that they can help the nation that is bleeding economically. Mr. President, there is this provision that the new section 15 of the proposed bill on VAT, it gave a threshold of any company with a turnover of 25 million must render their tax on or before the 21st of every month. I think this may be a bit difficult because in a nation where contracts are awarded, executed, and payment are not made until after 4 or 5 months. Now, who do you hold responsible? So I think there's a need for us, good as the intention of this provision is, Mr. President, I think there's a need for us to look at we should not put a law in place that people find difficult to obey. When projects are done, they are not paid for until 6 months, 7 months. In fact, the ministry will not go for procurement until when it's about 4 months after the budget has been passed. Now that the National Assembly has succeeded in maintaining a December deadline for passage of bills, of a money bill, you know, Mr. President, until last week, some contract in some of the zonal projects were just being awarded last week. Now, how do you now compare companies to give a turnover? I think this is one aspect, Mr. President, that we must look into. Mr. President, there's the provision for young graduate, companies.
Distinguished, please round up now. Yes.
Maybe kind of a tax relief before we start compelling them to adhere to some of these provisions in Section 28, the penalty being put in place. Good as it is, Mr. President, we expand our net, but let us expand the net not to consume the lowest of the low of the society, but let us start looking at those who have taken so much from the society. Now that society is bleeding, let us look at how those who own private jets, who own mansions and SUV cars can equally contribute to national development. God bless, Mr. President.
Senator Abdukori, Suleiman Abdukori.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Suleiman Abdukori. I represent Kaduna North. Mr. President, I wish to commend some of the innovative ways that the executive have put before us in trying to fund the 2021 budget.
Please, if you are not wearing your mask, wear it, please.
Some of the reliefs, Mr. President, that taxpayers are going to enjoy from some of these proposals are indeed very commendable. And I will particularly mention one of the ways that these funds are expected to be raised, which I think might end up being counterproductive. Mr. President, I want to single out the use of unclaimed dividend. Unclaimed dividend to be used for the purpose of funding 2021 should be reviewed by the executive, because these are funds whose ownership have been established, though not claimed by the real owners, but it will serve as a disincentive to investment, because these funds running into over 15 trillion are huge. And if allowed to be used in funding our budget, when the owners of these funds come up to claim them, there might be some bureaucracy involved, and the funds will not be readily available for the owners. So it will serve at this point in time as a disincentive to investment, and we are trying to attract more and more foreign investment. So anything that would seem to be counterproductive to attracting funds for productive uses in Nigeria should be discouraged. So I would want to call on the executive to single out this program and review it honestly. And we should also be looking forward to something like the pension fund administration that is done. And we all know the bad influences of pension. Right now, we have a lot of problems with the previous pension system, which has led to the contributory pension scheme. So I will urge the federal government to look at something like the pension fund administration that is currently in place, which has proven to be worthy of emulation going forward. And we should, instead of lumping these monies that are unclaimed or are seen to be unclaimed dividend into government coffers, I think this should be discouraged. So I would want to particularly mention this for noting, and also for the Senate to call on the executive to review this.
Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm Alif Sabi Abdullahi. I represent Niger North Senatorial District. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me first commend the executive for bringing this bill, and to say that, of course, this reflects a dynamic system that is responsive and, of course, ready to take the necessary action when the need arises. Because just so few months back, this very year, we passed the Finance Act, and I believe the pandemic that came to rattle the economy and send everybody in a very difficult path has necessitated the need to respond again to amendment of this bill. And of course, the National Assembly this night, Senate in particular, has made it very clear that we are ready to be very responsive, and that is why this bill is getting the kind of accelerated hearing. So I thought I should make this point so that the Nigerian public is aware that, of course, we are very sensitive and alive to our responsibility. Now, one very important point that this bill seeks to attend to is to enable us tackle the issue of job creation through improved economic growth and, of course, mobilizing more domestic revenue to ensure there is infrastructural development. We all know very rightly that, of course, every economy is a product of the nature of infrastructure it has to drive it. And this government has made it very clear that they are ready to work on the infrastructural deficit that this government or this country is witnessing. So let me say very clearly too that from the submission by the lead debate, the issue of the small and medium enterprise being given a boost here in terms of relieving the tax burden on them and some of the compliance issues, I think is a very, very strong innovation. And when we come to look at the details of the bill, I will urge that we take a very good look at that, because the small and medium enterprise in every economy absorbs more than half of the workforce. And where your small and medium enterprise is not doing well, then definitely you'll be witnessing very massive unemployment. And so I want to say that we should take note of that, so that when we come to look at the various provisions, those provisions must be such that they are able to at least stimulate further economic activity by our small and medium enterprises. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, one other point that has been made here, which I find very, very interesting, is the statement that tax education and sensitization of the public will go a long way in achieving compliance from taxpayers. I think beyond compliance, we need this tax education and mobilization or sensitization so that the taxpayers will begin to take interest in projects and programs as they are being implemented in the various communities, because it is their funds that is being used to provide some of these services, and they ought to take ownership. They ought to see that, yes, they give their maximum support, and it is only when this element of tax education is taken very seriously, that will begin to get Nigerians participating, showing more interest in what happened as government through the ministries, departments, and agencies are implementing projects. And I think it will not be too much if we even ask that the relevant tax authority should begin to mainstream tax education through the primary and secondary curriculum. Because one thing that is certain is that there are many people who are out there, either they are evading tax or they don't even know what tax stands for. And so it will be in our own collective interest going forward that we increase the level of awareness and try to catch the young ones young enough to understand what tax is all about. That way we'll be able to get it right. Finally, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I hope and pray that the intendment of these particular amendments will be met so that at the end of the day, we are aware that certain actions can also beget some unintended actions. So the committee must take note of some of these provisions so that at the end, we don't give a cure that is worse than the disease. Thank you very much.
Senator Adiola, assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Mr. President, very distinguished colleague. Let me start by saying that this has become a yearly ritual since returning the government expenditure estimate from January to December. And Mr. President, distinguished colleague, there is need to be done in trying to review generally our tax system. As you all are aware, last year, it was remarkable to note that at least we increased the VAT from 5 to 7.5%. And this year, the second leg of the transaction has been proposed, which has to do with failure of companies who have refused to remit their VAT income as at when due, to pay some certain penalty after some certain number of years, and the penalty has been moved upward from 5 to 10%. But basically, Mr. President, this goes to show that this government is very sensitive to the needs and the yearnings of its people, starting with the small-scale businesses. This year's provision takes a serious look into the small-scale businesses in terms of their commencement and their cessation period. This has been reviewed in this current tax provision that has been sent to the National Assembly for review. And this will go a long way to stimulate economy and encourage the development of the SMEs, that is the small-scale enterprises. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, you will quite agree with me that during last year, during the pandemic period, a lot of companies come to our intervention, to the aids of the government. And as a responsive government, to whom much is given, much is expected. This year's provisions also take care of those corporate entities that have supported the government during the COVID pandemic period, and to give them some tax relief so that they can be able to recoup some of those funds that have been spent during this period. Mr. President, unofficially, the global economy is in, will I use the word, is in distress, or the global economy is collapsing as a result of the pandemic. And one of the ways to stimulate back this economy is to outspend ourselves out of this global economic depression, which the entire world has found itself. And so I'm not surprised for this year's provision looking into the Public Procurement Act, so that we can put provisions in place that will enhance prompt execution of contracts of the federal government, which are very sensitive. And don't forget, they are extending this year's provision to both the judiciary and the legislature. And this will go a long way to stimulate the economy and see that we have spent ourselves out of this global downturn which the global economy has found itself. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, don't forget that there is need for us to raise more funds. As much as I want to agree with my colleague that these particular provisions that have been proposed by the executive will tend to generate more funds, but not as we expect. Most of the provision contained in this document centers around granting of reliefs to to most of the small companies, to major corporations, and basically, don't forget that there are a lot of Nigerian goods that tends to come into this country that have been going through Cotonou and all other neighboring countries. Part of what this finance bill tends to achieve is to ensure that we stop that particular kind of transaction, so that all our goods can come through both the land border and the sea at a very minimal rate that can be competitive with other neighboring tariffs. This is part of what this year's provision tends to achieve, and that is why we are looking into the custom tariffs and all other things, and in the procurement to spend ourselves out of this global economic pandemic, which everybody has found itself. And don't forget, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, the vaccine for COVID has just been officially been found, and UK, as at this morning, has approved the application of this vaccine on their citizenry, that is the one made by Pfizer and BioNTech, has been approved. And this is a good news for us, at least as the world continues to see an end to the global pandemic called the COVID-19. And this prompt action on the part of the federal government, coming up with this Finance Act, which is all encompassing at this point in time, will go a long way, not only to stimulate and drive our economy out of this global recession, but also will assist us to reposition our revenue generation drive and sensitize the country through prompt payment of their taxes in time, so that government can have enough at their disposal to fund their respective projects. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I am in total support of this bill, and all others that have come up with some argument, like the issue of property tax. Property tax is within the jurisdiction of the state government to assess. It's not within the purview of the federal government. While that of the Abuja reside with the FCT, Federal Inland Revenue Services, to look into. But that affect the federal government is what is contained in this provision, and I believe we should all support, so that at least a good job can be done and we can bring our economy back online. Thank you, Mr. President. I so submit.
Thank you, Senator Gabriel Suswam.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'm Dr. Gabriel Suswam, Benue Northeast. Mr. President, most of my comments were taken by Suleiman, but I would like to comment on two aspects. One is the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Mr. President, why we're receiving the Minister of Finance, we agree that because the deficit ratio to revenue was above the provisions of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that it was going to be incorporated in the amendment that will be brought before us. Mr. President, I haven't seen the REACT, but it's not captured here. I can't see it. What I've seen here is the cost to revenue for government-owned enterprises, which we agree that some of them need to be amended. But the deficit ratio to revenue is not presented here, and that is very important. Otherwise, the government will be seen to be breaching the very statute that we passed here, that says that the deficit ratio to revenue should not be beyond 3%. What we have in the budget is 3.6. So we need to amend the Fiscal Responsibility Act to accommodate that. I can't see that here. Now, I want to... Solomon, you are saying no? I see you. Oh, it's okay. Now, except that is in the details, we'll look at it. The amendment of the Procurement Act, like he said, Mr. President, you will observe that most time government agencies and ministries will have to take money back at the end of the year because of the difficulties that the Procurement Act have presented over time. And so there's the absolute need for us to make the Procurement Act to accommodate the system, so that we don't have a situation where year in, year out, you hear that procurement is a problem. Most of the ministries, now up till now, we're in December, most of the MDs are still pursuing the procurement process for them to access money. So I think government has done well if in the details that is addressed, so that they can make it a bit flexible, so as to avoid returning money when projects are standing are not handled. Finally, Mr. President, I want to touch on what the new section 15 of VAT has been exposed here by Senator Smart. Mr. President, the reason why the CBN monetary policy have not achieved the desired result is because most of the people are operating outside the banking system. So it has become very difficult for CBN to track the entire money that is within the system. And if we provide certain provisions that will further drive people down to operate outside of the banking system, that can become very problematic as we move on. There's the absolute need for the CBN, when they are engaging in taking monetary policies, that those reflect, at least not completely, but almost near the reality of the situation. And so this section 15 of VAT, I think when we come to look at the details, there's a need for us to critically look at this so as to make it more flexible so that people don't go outside of the banking system to keep stash of money in their houses. Mr. President, finally, you have what economists call people, a large number of Nigerians live within what the economists call autonomous consumption. Those are people who wake up in the morning and come to National Assembly hoping that they will walk into Senator Aliu and get 5 naira or 50,000 to go and eat. Mr. President, how do the tax system capture people who are living in this autonomous consumption? So I think that why we are doing this, because they constitute a large chunk, day in, day out. It's not just here. When you walk out of this place, all of them feed the corridors of the National Assembly. What they get is...
Do you mean they should pay tax?
There is no economy that does not capture such people. If we don't, because you can find them, they're almost 40%. And so if we are trying to look for money, there must be an innovation where people who are living within these autonomous, what they call autonomous consumers, must be somehow captured within this so that...
Well, captured for what purpose? To pay tax?
If we are giving them tax incentive or exempting them, that should also be stated. But we can't continue that way because a lot of people will drift to that group. So if we don't do something, you have a situation where a lot of people will begin to drift to that group, and so you begin to decrease what you intend to get from this. Mr. President, I so submit.
Senator Albert Basiakpan.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished and respected colleagues, Senator Albert Basi Akpan, Akwabo Northeast. Mr. President, I will not stop commending you for your show of leadership, your consistency and your insistence that we must sustain the January to December fiscal period has led this country to where we are today. And let me also say, Mr. President, that in doing this, we must also be conscious of the fact that investors take certain investment decisions on the basis of the position of our tax laws. Therefore, amending most of these tax laws will somehow, like the Liberty Chief Whip had actually said, will somehow also affect the confidence and the focus of an investor. But be that as it may, Mr. President, one thing is certain, because if you look at the fiscal instrument used in managing an economy, for example, it is the use of government expenditure and taxation is what is used in managing fiscal means of managing an economy. It is either you bring down, whenever you are bringing down your taxation, you must increase government expenditure. Mr. President, let us not, in a quest to generate enough money to fund our budget, impact negatively on economic activity.
I'm going to align myself with just two sections of this lead debate because I haven't seen the contents of the main bill. Mr. President, I agree in totality on the amendment to the personal income tax because I've always insisted that it is better to bring more and more people into government tax net than increasing taxes. Because if you look at the value-added positions of bringing more people into the tax net, it is more effective in terms of the generations of our revenue. So I agree totally with the amendment to the personal income tax, where it is made compulsory that a personal income tax identification number must be included in an account opening. By so doing, it is certain that you will trap and entrap more people into government tax net. Mr. President, let me even say something about the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Most of the revenue-generating agencies still retains revenue they generate without transferring 25% as stipulated in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Therefore, we must look at this act to show what kind of penalties and consequences can be ensured in this amendment to make it more effective. That agencies, you've been clamoring and crying out aloud on agencies who generate government revenue, then retains them and expend them the way they like. So this is the time for us as a National Assembly to put in place and ensure and enhance those penalties that will make it unbearable for any agency who generates government taxes and does not remit in line with the provisions of the Extant Act. So I commend you and I commend the National Assembly for this initiative, but please, we must be cautious that, like the Deputy Chief has actually stated, that the cure that we are trying to perform and not end up compounding the woes of those that this amendment is actually meant and desirous to attend. So I thank you, Mr. President, and I thank this National Assembly. Thank you so much.
Senator Engineer Kabir Barkia.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm Senator Engineer Kabir Abdullahi Barkia, representing Qatar Central. Mr. President, if we look at all these amendments, tax A or tax B or C, what I wanted to say here, we have to look at all this, maybe increase in the tax, whether VAT or whatever we call it, to see what is going to be the impact of all this amendment on the common man. Because, Mr. President, there's no need maybe we sit down, of course. We know there are some that if, of course, amended, increased, that will help the generality of Nigeria. And those that, of course, we see that yes, it cannot, the impact of it will be negatively to the generality of Nigeria. We have to look at it and maybe see that, yes, we have to remove that amendment. For example, Mr. President, I could recall when we increased VAT. Personally, after some days, I went to market myself. Could you recall that even somebody who is selling just a recharge card, or maybe even selling this food stuff, you go, they will tell you, they increase the price because the VAT has been increased. But what is the impact, the positive impact of all this increment of the VAT to the common man? So we have to look at it. And again, Mr. President, just like one of the distinguished colleagues said, that we have to look at, okay, when we increase all these taxes, what are the type of the project we are going to do? I could recall during the Sani Abacha, when they said they increased in oil, the PTA of that time, they said, okay, PTA was there at least to execute some work, some project, so that yes, people will see that yes, the benefit of increasing of the petrol prices, at least they could see it. Roads were paid, at least hospitals were paid. So all this has to look at, we have to look at it, Mr. President. Because there's no need every year we say we increase tax A, tax B. But at the end of the day, we don't have anything, any project on the ground to show. So I have to call on this chamber and also particularly the committee of finance committee to look at all these taxes. Not just, okay, yes, they bring it and then we agree that yes, we increase. At the end of the day, we have nothing to show. So therefore, I really, in as much as I support this bill, we have to also look at and study it and see what are we going to extract out and then what will remain there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Mohammed Sani Musa.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Mohammed Sani Musa, representing Niger East. The finance bill, I believe, is coming at the right time. The amendment is coming at the right time, looking at how the whole world GDP has gone down. So many countries are going into recession. The same thing as we are today, we are in a way in a recession. No matter how our projections are, we have to look inwardly to see how we can support our economy. Believing in the bilateral relationship with international donors or IMF or World Bank to support our economy cannot continue to work. Because we cannot continue going and taking loans all the time. So this finance bill, I think, is coming at the right time. This amendment is coming at the right time. But my major concern is the issue of collection and remittance. The issue of collection and remittance from all those revenue-generating agencies. This bill should adequately be able to look into that, because there are agencies that interact with the public sector. I give example, like the aviation sector, the airline operators. They collect revenue every day when passengers travel. But that money they collect is with the airline operator, and they will keep it in an escrow account somewhere in a bank, and only God knows when it takes them to remit. So this final bill should make a provision whereby all these revenues that are being generated should be able to go to TSA, Treasury Single Account, immediately. There's a lot of accounting softwares today that will provide that opportunity where the operator will take its own money, and the money that belongs to government, which is the revenue, should be able to be remitted immediately. Most countries today operate the same thing, and it works for them. So if it works for them, I see no reason why it cannot work here. A typical example is the stamp duty. Before now, stamp duties are being collected, they have been domiciled in a bank, and for many years, nobody is talking about them, but we should know that that money that has been in the banks have been using that money to transact business, which is why they earn, and then it is at the detriment of the country. So I believe if we look at these areas, the finance bill will make adequate provision for the funding of the 2021 budget and other budgets that will come. And this can also make us to go out to exit recession as quick as possible. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Bikula Amosu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ibikunle Amosu, I represent Ogun Central. Mr. President, let me join my colleagues in saying that this amendment to the finance bill, well, you can say it's timely, but I think it's long overdue. And Mr. President, let me say that we should not, and I repeat not, bring bills just because of probably what is happening now. We should look beyond now. Our bills should be such that will stand the test of time, that will last for maybe several other years before we come for another amendment like this. If you know when these amendments should have been made,
And where it's now being proposed, clearly it's probably because of the challenges that we are presently having, COVID and what have you. But we shouldn't have waited this far before even bringing this. But Mr. President, let me say this. I've listened to several of my colleagues, and we are all in sync with one thing. And that is the fact that, yes, we need to increase our revenue. But in increasing our revenue, we should be mindful of the fact that a good tax system is such that people will willingly want to adhere with it and pay. When we create a system that people are now running away, evading taxes, not avoiding them, then you know there's a crisis, Mr. President. Some of my colleagues have argued that a lot are outside the banking sector. A lot of our people, not even those in the informal sector that is even doing something every day, that probably in a day they go to the market, whatever they earn, and that day that they will feed on. But there are several millions. And I'm sure that this is Senator Susan that was saying that when you go out there, you see legion of people, everybody begging for money. It's now a norm. And until when we do things like this, that will make all of them to work. Because ordinarily, nobody, we want to be begging. But clearly now, it's like a norm. People do not have things doing. And until when we begin to create a system that will enable our people to work, look at all our youth. And no work will be created, no employment will be created unless we have our infrastructures in place. It is when we have all these infrastructures in place that our real sector will be developed. Until our real sector is developed, we'll be chasing shadows. Agriculture, mining, manufacturing. Until all of those are attended to, we'll just be chasing shadow like this. Mr. President, I've looked into this again and again, and I noticed that we should begin to encourage, which is what this amendment is seeking to do, encourage our medium and small-scale enterprises, our MSME, micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises. They are the arteries. They are those that will allow our people to work. Even in this chamber, even it affected almost all of us. People every day saying that we are looking for a job for, we will ask, is it for you? Say, yes, this is for my daughter, it's for my son. It's affecting all of us. People out there did not know that this thing is now the chickens are coming home to roost. Just look at the recent answers that we have. Until when the house, if we fail to provide for the have-nots, they will not allow us to enjoy what we have. So let me now pinpoint in all of this that have been said. I'm happy that somebody mentioned on this unclaimed dividend, even though it's not directly here. But let me say something about it. Yes, the government is right to say that let's look for money. Let's mop up all maybe fund that is there. But the way they are trying to go about it is wrong. Why do we even have this huge unclaimed dividend? It is just so straightforward. They make the system so cumbersome that it's difficult for people to access their dividend. Look at during the time of boom, all these banks, people were buying shares, buying this, buying that. And when the thing collapsed, the banks were reduced from maybe 50 about 100 to maybe maximum of 20. All of those up to today, nobody can access their dividend. And now the government are now planning to just more or less, maybe they want to access this fund. The rule says that maybe after 15 months, the unclaimed dividend will be returned back to those companies. The money are there. But what we should do is to ensure that those money work for us. It is not by maybe the government going directly through fiat and take the money. No. What we should do is to now reduce all of those bottlenecks that will enable people to claim their dividend. Once you lose your loved ones, anybody that died, it is difficult for the next of kin of people that you left behind to even access those funds. And until when those are done, we'll continue to do like this. Look at our pension fund. We have huge amount of money there. These are money that should have been used, but people don't have confidence in the system. And that's why nobody is ready to let go with those money. And until when we have access to all these risk-free funds that are just there idling, doing nothing, we will continue to chase shadows like this. I have looked into what we are trying to do. We should find a way to get all this informal sector into the banking system. And the best way to do it is to continue to encourage our people to work. And there will be no work unless we do the right thing. Infrastructure will be in place, and once infrastructure is in place, then people will begin to do the needful. If we are not careful, people will still continue to take their money out of the banking sector. International investors, even local investors, they will be wary of the system and they will not want to contribute to what is happening now. The world is not static, and that is why it is important that we should continue to move with time like this. I have seen the percentages that they've done. They've increased some, maybe from 5 to 50,000, some to even say maybe anybody above 25 million is what it's good. But we should do more than that. And that is why I really cannot wait to have this bill so that we can look into clauses by clauses and see how we can better the lot of our people. Mr. President, on that note, I want to say that what the amendment proposed under the Procurement Act is good as well. In a scenario where look at the month today, people are still running around. And even people that have worked before. And I'm happy in this chamber we have passed to say that the advance that they should be given should be, I think it's been increased to 35, not the party maybe 15% that the job will not be done. And years over years upon years, they will be saying ongoing, ongoing, ongoing. And clearly, you know the results. Money will be misappropriated. There are some other areas where we should look into, and that is the area of wastages, how we can reduce our costs. Indeed, we are battling with one now. In a scenario where you just have 500 and something people and earning 9 billion, then you need to look at it. So, Mr. President, this amendment is coming at the right time. And we should look beyond what the challenges that we are having now, because we are going to surmount this and what happens after this challenge. So I so submit, Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator Ahmad Adamaleru.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I remain Muhammad Adamaleru, representing Kebbi Central. Mr. President, I rise to give my support to this important bill, principally because there is sharp fall in revenue from oil, and because of that, there is need to look inward. We have to block all loopholes and leakages to ensure that we collect enough revenue in order to implement the policies and programs of this government. It is for that reason that I lend my support to this very important bill. But Mr. President, there are other very important issues that need to be looked into. The informal sector has not been cut in the tax net. It is even stated that the informal sector has a lot of money that is unaccounted for, and there is need for the Federal Inland Revenue Service and even Nigerian Customs Service to also look into the way of bringing the informal sector into the tax net. It is by so doing that we will maximize, the revenue collection. Mr. President, equally important is the way we clear our goods at the port. Our ports are very, very expensive. That's why many importers are now running to neighboring ports like Cotonou and Lomé to clear their goods. And mostly they clear them and bring them into the country without payment of import duty, simply because of stringent conditions that are operating in our port. Mr. President, there is need to make our ports more friendly so that businesses can thrive in these ports. Mr. President, the issue of penalties that is proposed is good. The issue of penalties that is being imposed is good, so that there will be compliance. People have been very, very negligent. They have been complacent. They collect VAT and they fail to remit it into the FIIs. Many companies are doing that. Many banks are also at fault in doing that.
when this bill is passed into law, it will certainly reduce this kind of practices, and more revenue is coming into the government coffers. Mr. President, when we come to the issue of import duties, I think there is need also to look at ways and means of reducing import duties. The more import duty you impose on imported goods, the more likely it is for importers to evade customs duty. And that is why a number of them are taking their goods to neighboring ports where they pay virtually nothing to bring in these goods. So there is need for us to look into the way we can reduce import duty so that importers can be encouraged to bring in their goods and clear them with relative ease. If we do that, Mr. President, it will bring a lot of sanity into our ports, and it will also increase the revenue collection, by customs service. Mr. President, the budget of 2021, there is just no way we can realize that revenue without improving revenue collection within the country. The oil revenue has gone down, and it is expected that it may not likely go up in the next 3 to 4 months. So the best way now is to look inward. It is for that reason that I support this bill, and I urge all my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Senator Ishaq Kwabo. Ishaq Kwabo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Ishaq Kwabo. I represent Adamawa North, APC. Mr. President, sir, in the second reason why this bill is even being considered, they say to prioritize job creation, economic growth, and socio-economic development. Mr. President, while we are working so hard to show up our revenues, to get as much money as we can so that we can implement government policies and projects, Mr. President, we have to also look at the ways these monies will be spent or how they are spent. That means as much as you are trying to raise monies for government, we have to actually look, Mr. President, on how our budgets are being developed as legislators, as people representatives. We have to look keenly at how our budgets are being developed and how they are being implemented. I'm saying this because I remember someone once said, that was during the oil boom, when things were so good for Nigeria. Someone once said that the problem of Nigeria is not money. The problem of Nigeria is how to spend the money. Now the problem of Nigeria now is money. How to raise the money. The money is not there for us. Mr. President, while we are trying to raise funds for government, how do we make budget in this country? As our budget actually tailored toward the needs of the common man at the grassroots, or we are actually doing the usual copy and paste budget of the past? Mr. President, I was discussing with Central Country's team now, and I was telling him, I continue to advocate this, sir. We have 774 local governments in Nigeria. Mr. President, it is high time that at any point, it's even in the spirit of federal character, at any point in time, we are drawing a budget for this country. Let us look at each local government in Nigeria. So the federal government of Nigeria should allocate one single viable project, even if it's just 500 million naira worth of project. It should be cited in each local government in Nigeria, whether in agriculture, in education, in health, or in any component. If today, Adamawa State, we have 21 local government, and the federal government made provision in the budget from the money that we are trying to raise, a provision of 500 million naira worth of projects in each local government. In 10 years' time, Mr. President, there will be 10 projects of government in each of the local government Adamawa State. So, Mr. President, as much as we are trying to raise this money for government, please let us look at how our budgets are being drawn and how our budgets are implemented so that we can stimulate the economic growth right at the grassroots. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President.
Senator Ike Ikoramadu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues, I rise on behalf of the ordinary people of Nigeria to, with due respect, appeal for caution as we deliberate on this finance bill. Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, I'm more conscious of the fact that most countries are dependent on taxation for their economy, but most of these countries are the countries that are not as endowed as our country in terms of natural resources. Today, those natural resources have been largely mismanaged, and then we are reverting to the issue of using tax regime to raise revenue. That's fine. But in doing this, Mr. President, let me appeal that whatever we do with taxation must be people-friendly. We are here representing our constituents and ordinary people of Nigeria. It is our primary responsibility to ensure that no tax regime be oppressive to the cause of our people. And I believe that one way to ensure that this happens is to interrogate this bill largely and put it into the public domain and have an extensive public hearing on this so that Nigerians will be able to make their input. Yes, we are trying to raise money for government to implement the budget. That budget is for the ordinary people of Nigeria. We are going to tax people to raise this money. Those who are taxing our people, our constituents. So they need to make sufficient input before the final product of this particular bill. Mr. President, there are several areas the government can tap in to be able to raise money to finance the budget. I'm aware, and you're also aware, that if you make a cash transaction in the bank, you pay a penalty. Nobody has asked what happens to this penalty. Does it go to the bank or does it go to the government? These are the things I would like the Finance Act to be able to deal with, because such are huge monies that can help the government in raising some of the revenues they are looking for, instead of taxing the ordinary people in manners that is oppressive. So I believe that we need to look at this bill critically. We need to put it into the public domain and allow sufficient people to contribute. We must not hurry this bill, because doing so will be oppressive. And I do hope that even if we are unable to pass this bill before they pass the Appropriation Act, this bill will still be relevant for subsequent years. It is important that we put it into public test and see what the Nigerian public says, so that we do not in any way dislocate ourselves from the people that elected us to be here. So I believe that it is important to support a bill such as this, but we must ensure that the people of Nigeria are ordinarily carried along. And I hope and believe that this Senate has always done that in the past, and will have opportunity, even at this time, to do it again. This is my submission, sir.
Senator Yusuf.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, Yusuf A. Yusuf, Taraba Central. This tax reform, I call it tax reform bill, in the sense that everywhere in the world today, every country is trying to reform its own tax laws and tax policies. Mr. President, sir, I dare say, in this country, it is the poor that is subsidizing the rich, because the rich are always in a position to protect their own interests by making sure that the tax they pay is actually not commensurate with the revenue that they have. As I look around here, sir, 80 to 90% of what we wear is foreign. And that has been draining, the meager foreign exchange that we have in this country. So this tax reform bill, I should want to see it to discourage our own interest in foreign goods, in foreign textiles, in foreign, even services that we have. Unless where it is absolutely necessary that we should use them. Examples are, we have so many luxury items. Example, DSTV. For me, it is a luxury item. There are nearly, 1 million or over 1 million subscribers. And many of them are subscribing to the tune of 15,000 naira, 18,000 naira, 20,000 naira a month. That is one area that we should look into to tax those high bracket bundles that we subscribe. And also, this tax reform bill, by looking at all these areas, we should find a way of using the tax reform to diversify our economy. We have been trying to do this thing since 1986, probably since 1979, but we have not gotten it right. And the reason is because the rich are protecting themselves to the extent that they do not want to participate in effective diversification of this economy. So we must use this tax reform to diversify the economy. Otherwise, as we continue to rely on crude oil, we'll continue until we go to a stage where we get stopped and we cannot go any forward. So, Mr. Chairman, my distinguished colleagues, it is my own support for this second reading of the bill, and at the same time, we must adjust even the VAT. I don't see any reason why we should have, even though it is ad valorem, but I don't see any reason why we should stick to a certain percentage for everything. We should have a progressive, VAT regime in this country. Also, sir, in order to improve, the financial management, we have to accept the fact that our attitudes must change towards protecting, the poor by taxing the rich more because they are enjoying the luxuries at the expense of the common man in this country. Mr. President, sir, this is where I have to emphasize. We diversify the economy through the tax reform. At the same time, we have redistribution of income through the tax reform in favor of the poor. And also, we reform this taxation in order to protect our local industries. Our local industries, who cannot afford, I think we should give them, a long period of tax holidays, or even, reduce the tax rate, probably 10%, instead of clicking, to the level that we are today. By this, Mr. President, sir, I support the second reading of this bill. I so second. Thank you very much.
Senator Matthew Urogide.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Senator Matthew Urogide. I represent Edo South Central District. Mr. President, the finance bill for 2020 that is before us, I believe is a welcome development because what is important at this point in time is for us to be able to elicit development in our country. And to do that, we will need all the resources that we can generate to be able to do this development. Mr. President, it is true that the finance bill is talking about funds generation or income generation. And all our existing acts are already mentioned in this bill for amendment. One would have expected to, just like Senator Cliff, Madam Awa, former PDP senator, said, I just believe that if we take in all these resources into the store, and the utilization of these resources are not equally well guided by law, all these efforts will be in futility. Mr. President, I'm talking from the position of experience that we have seen thus far. You recall that the finance bill for 2019 was passed by the National Assembly and sent to by Mr. President. Yes, it is true that any act that we have can always be amended to meet the exigencies of the moment. Therefore, looking for amendment in all these existing acts, I think is very well founded. But I believe we should equally, join income generation with income utilization, or funds generation and fund utilization. Because these two, they are the components of our budget. The revenue side, and then of course, the expenditure side. If we generate all this money, making amendments, and we do not utilize them properly, it will be exercise in futility. So, any of these are acts, Mr. President. The Finance Act must equally be attached with the audit bill, so that the federal audit bill, so that utilization of our resources, we will ensure transparency, we will ensure accountability, we will ensure economy. This is one thing we just must do. Number two, Mr. President, I want to go to the specific issue of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. Today, that is the act, the only act that we have that tends to have a consequence for the wrong use of public funds. We don't have any other act today. Maybe in our criminal or penal code, we have other things that have to do with stealing public funds. But when it comes to the issue of violation of our acts, there are no serious consequences in any act that can be meted out to any accounting officer or any government agency or MDA. So, Mr. President, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, when I got in, Senator Ababasi was making a submission. The submission was make reference to Fiscal Responsibility Act. In that act, I think section 18(2)(a), specifically speaking, talks about operating surplus. The act is very clear, because all this issue of generating funds, that is the one specific place in our act that has to do with remitting 80% to government coffers and 20% to be retained by the MDA. If there is any malfeasance in this, if there is anything that is negative about observing the provisions of this act, that same act says that the offending officer will refer to the Attorney General of the Federation for possible prosecution. That is, again, you can see it's nebulous. Till date, there is no person that has been referred to the Attorney General for the Federation for prosecution for violating the Fiscal Responsibility Act. So anything that we are doing, the amendment of this act, we must address that provision of the act. Number two, Mr. President, the IGR, or internally generated revenue, that we're talking about, all of these two come under this amendment that we are seeking for the finance bill. what is IGRO? And is there any law, is there any act of the National Assembly that tends to put in place consequences for the wrong utilization of internally generated revenue? Internally generated revenue by NDAs is what they get in outside of budgetary provision. Anything they have to do. If we check the NDAs one by one, if you go to the federal tertiary health institutions, the teaching hospitals, university teaching hospitals, virtually all of them, and the federal medical centers, you go to other agencies of government, they equally have a different application of IGRO. There is no act that says this is what it must be. And there is a misconception along the line, all of them. If you ask them, they will tell you, we remit 75%. You ask them, they will say we remit 80%. You ask them, they will say we remit 25%. The only thing that has to do with IGRO is only a government circular. That government circular, I think it came in about 2015 or 2016, saying that 75% must be utilized by the agency and 25% paid to government coffers. So we too must harmonize all of this. Most of the time, agencies come to do budget defense.
The Distinguished, you can round up now.
We want to find out budget utilization previous year. Many of them do not give account of the IGRO. And this IGRO does not even know what we mean by gross income and by net income of IGRO. So please, let us put all of this in all our intending laws, in all these our bills, so that there is a clear understanding of revenue generation. And then, of course, with agencies, let us put our eyes on what they're able to generate. And if they fall short of the law, we must be able to put an act in place to spare consequences for violation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, is there anyone against the bill? Okay. Those in favor of that this bill will be now read a second time, say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to amend the Capital Gains Tax Act, Companies Income Tax Act, Personal Income Tax Act, Tertiary Education Trust Fund Establishment Act, Custom and Excise Tariff, etc. Consolidated Act, Value Added Tax, Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act, Nigeria Export Processing Zones Act, Oil and Gas Export Free Zone Act, Fiscal Responsibility Act, Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, Public Procurement Act, in order to make further provision in connection with federal government financial management, public revenue, and other related matters connected therewith, 2020, second reading.
A bill for an act to amend the Capital Gains Tax Act, Companies Income Tax Act, Personal Income Tax Act, Tertiary Education Trust Fund Establishment Act, Customs and Excise Tariff, etc. Consolidated Act, Value Added Tax, Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act, Nigeria Export Processing Zone Act, Oil and Gas Export Free Zone Act, Fiscal Responsibility Act, Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, Public Procurement Act, in order to make further provisions in connection with the federal government financial management, public revenue, and other relevant matters connected there with 2020. Second reading taken, and the bill is referred to the Senate Committees on Finance, Customs, Public Procurement, and Trade and Investment to report back within 1 week, with Committee on Finance as lead committee. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day is the second reading of the University of Aerospace and Aeronautics, OCA, Akoko Establishment, etc. Bill 2020. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Tuesday, 24th March 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Robert Ajayi Borofis to move the motion for the bill to be read the second time.
Senator, Deputy Leader, Senator Robert Ajayi Borofis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, I have the honor to lead the debate on the general principles of this bill. This bill seeks to establish the University of Aerospace and Aeronautics in Okakoko, Ondo State. The bill was first read on the floor of Senate on the 24th of March, 2020. While aerospace relates to the science and technology associated with aircraft, missiles, satellites, and spacecraft, aeronautics is about the design, construction, mathematics, and mechanics of aircraft and other flying objects. In pursuance of our national space program, over 200 Nigerians were trained in aerospace and aeronautic science technology in the United States of America, Ukraine, Russia, and Britain. In order to sustain our space program, the proposed university will provide endogenous facility for capacity building in the aerospace science and technology and aeronautics. On the other hand, the aerospace and aeronautics sector in Nigeria is growing at a rate that warrants a local support for its sustenance. As at now, most of the support services are provided outside the country and in few cases within Nigeria. Mr. President, my respected distinguished colleagues, in Africa, there are few institutions offering aerospace-related engineering programs, and there is no dedicated University of Aerospace and Aeronautics in Nigeria. Therefore, the bill seeks to transform aerospace industry, and such transformation can only succeed through the establishment of a university that will lead training and research programs and also ensure local availability of skilled workforce in Nigeria. The proposed university will take off from an existing advanced aerospace engineering center in Akoko, which was established 3 years ago. The contents of the bill contains 26 sections and 3 schedules. It seeks an act to provide for the establishment of University of Aerospace and Aeronautics and for matters of administration and discipline of students connected therewith. Objectives. The bill spells out its 12 fundamental objectives, which include 1, to develop centers of excellence and a critical mass of experts within the space, aerospace, and aeronautics education industry. 2, to encourage the advancement of learning and to hold out to all persons without discrimination of race, creed, sex, or political conviction the opportunity of acquiring a higher education in aerospace and aeronautics science, technology, and engineering. To identify the technological problems and needs of space, aerospace, and aeronautics industry, and to find solutions to them within the context of overall national development. Constitution of principal officers of the university. The university shall consist of the chancellor, the pro-chancellor, and the council, the vice-chancellor, and the senate, the body to the core congregation, the campuses and colleges of the university, the schools, institutes, and other teaching and research units of the university, and others as clearly stated in section 2 of the bill. The further powers of the university and their exercise. Furthermore, in order to achieve its objectives, the university has its 17 powers, which include to establish such colleges, institutes, and research units within the university as may from time to time be deemed necessary or desirable, subject to the approval of the National University Commission. 2, to provide for the discipline and welfare of members of the university. And 3, to institute and award fellowships, scholarships, exhibition, bursary, medals, prizes, and other titles, distinction awards, and forms of assistance. Composition of the council. Moreover, the council of the university shall consist of the pro-chancellor, the vice-chancellor, the deputy vice-chancellor, the person from ministry responsible for education, 9 persons representing variety of interest and broadly representative of the whole federation, to be appointed by the president, 4 persons appointed by the Senate from among its members, 2 persons appointed by congregation from among its members, and 1 person appointed by convocation from among its members. Furthermore, the president shall be the visitor of the university, and the visitor shall, as often as the circumstances may require, not being less than once every 5 years, conduct a visitation of the university or direct that such a visitation be conducted by such person or persons as the visitor may deem fit in respect of any affairs of the university. Exclusion of discrimination on account of race, religion. Other issues covered in the bill include exclusion of discrimination on account of race and religion, quorum and procedure of bodies established by this legislation, retiring age of academic staff, and special provision relating to pensions of professors. Conclusion, Mr. President and my respected colleagues, to conclude my lead debate, this bill, when passed, will improve the capacity of Nigeria to identify the technological problems and needs of the space, aerospace, and aeronautics industry, and to find solutions to them within context of overall national development. It will also ensure local availability of skilled workforce in the field of aerospace and aeronautics in Nigeria. It will further enable Nigeria to have critical mass of experts within space, aerospace, and aeronautics education industry. The university will not need a take-off grant because the precursor of it is already in the budget. Distinguished colleagues, I solicit your support for this bill to be read the second time. Thank you.
Any contribution? Yeah, Senator Tofomo.
Mr. Senate President, distinguished colleagues, I'm supporting this bill. Firstly, I'm from the same state with the presenter of this bill, and aerospace means a lot to us in Nigeria, because our airports are developing gradually, and aerospace in Nigeria will open up West Africa. So the aerospace is not only going to be useful for us in Nigeria, it will cover West Africa, and it's going to be very, very meaningful. So I support this, and I believe if we can all rally around the Deputy Senate Leader, by the time he's retiring, going back home, definitely his people will know that he has come back home with something very, very important. So definitely I support this bill. It's going to be very, very useful. Thank you.
Anybody against the bill? I will put them. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to provide for the establishment of University of Aerospace and Aeronautics, ACOCA, and for matters of administration and discipline of students connected therewith, 2020, SB 409, second reading.
A bill for an act to provide for the establishment of University of Aerospace and Aeronautics, ACOCA, and for matters of administration and discipline of students connected there with 2020 second reading taking. And the bill is referred to the Senate Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund to report by within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the third order of the day is the second reading of Federal Medical Center or EDDA, Establishment Etc. Bill 2020. Distinguished colleagues will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Tuesday, 30th January 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Michael Amanach to move the motion for the bill to be read the second time.
Senator Michael Amanach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, lead debate on the Federal Medical Center, OUTADA, Establishment, etc., Bill 2020 SB 295, sponsored by Michael Nachi. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, permit me to lead the debate on the bill for an act to establish the Federal Medical Center, OUTADA, Boyne State. The bill was read the first time in the Hallowed Chamber on Thursday, 30th January 2020. This bill seeks to establish the Federal Medical Center, OUTADA, Boyne State, and make provisions for its due management and administration. This bill was put together in response to the cries of many constituents, especially those in densely populated areas whose daily watch helplessly as women and children die due to lack of well-equipped healthcare centers. This move for the establishment of the Federal Medical Center is therefore informed by the need to bridge the existing gap between primary, secondary health care and tertiary health care delivery in Boyne State and Nigeria as a whole. The gap between the primary, secondary, and specialist health care in Nigeria is widening. There is no seamless transition from one to the other due to a number of factors. The factors include accessibility to medical facilities, affordability of medical care, as well as inadequate medical personnel at primary and secondary health care levels. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, communicable diseases have continued to ravage many Nigerian communities due to the distance between the communities and tertiary health care institutions. Patients cannot access specialist hospitals where their ailments can be properly diagnosed and adequate treatment given. This unfortunate situation has also compounded the challenge of maternal and infant mortality. Densely populated urban and rural communities are worst hit. Their poor economic situation makes resort to patronizing private hospitals near impossible. To bring tertiary health care closer to the people, the upgrading of General Hospital Utera to Federal Medical Center Utera is therefore not only a necessity, but an urgent imperative. The Nigerian National Health Policy is very clear on the role of different types of government in healthcare delivery. Primary health care is to be provided by local governments, secondary health care by state governments, and tertiary health care by the federal government. In operationalizing this policy, Federal Medical Center, FMC, fill vacuums created by either the non-existence or inadequacy of federal university teaching hospitals in a state. The Federal Medical Center, like its counterparts around the world, is envisioned as a multidisciplinary space for treatment, research, harnessing science, and developing innovative means of tackling the numerous health challenges bedeviling the nation. Additionally, when established, the center will perform the following functions. 1, to equip, maintain, and operate the center so as to provide facilities for diagnosis, preventive, corrective, and rehabilitative services in medical treatment. 2, to support and provide enabling environment for medical training of personnel as the board may consider necessary. 3, to run an effective and cost-effective medical services to Nigerians. And the last, to review and update medical findings and research from time to time. When the bill is passed, assented by Mr. President and the Federal Medical Center of Ebonyi State will provide services in specialized areas like neurosurgery, cardiology, urology, orthopedic, pediatric, internal medicine, radiography, ear, nose, and throat treatments, and ENT, gynecology, psychiatric, nuclear medicine, and other fields of medicine that may be required by Nigerians. I therefore urge Mr. President and my fellow distinguished colleagues to take a giant step in the right direction by supporting this bill for second reading and also backing its accelerated passage. In line with Order 77.3 of the Senate Standing Order 2/2015 as amended, a compendium of the financial implications of the establishment of Federal Medical Center Uteda, Ebonyi State, is hereby attached. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Abomoro.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Abomoro. I represent the very good people of the Benue South Senatorial District of Benue State. Mr. President, I rise to second this bill read by my colleague, Senator Nachi, very eloquently presented. And in line with our desire, Mr. President, that this 9th Senate will intervene in every area of the life of the average Nigerian. I believe that we're all aware that in recent times, epidemics and pandemics have taken a great toll on the life of our people. And in most cases, very sad enough that some of these deaths occurred because of the inability of patients to access medical services. More so in our very rural areas where accessibility is compounded by poor road networks. I believe, therefore, that in accepting that this bill be read a second time and facilitating the establishment of this Federal Medical Center, this Assembly would have gone one step further in convincing Nigerians that we are assembled here to attend to their well-being. Mr. President, I support this bill and I urge my colleagues to equally support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Samuel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Dr. Sam Ebu, representing Ebonyi North. Mr. President, I rise to support this very important debate on the establishment of the Federal Medical Center at Owuteda in Ebonyi State. Mr. President, the mover of this, or the person who led this debate, Ama Nachi, has done a very good job, and I want to commend him for this. Mr. President, Owuteda is a community at the extreme end of Ebonyi State, the southern part. And providing this facility to them will go a long way in reducing a lot of deaths that is associated with a lack of prompt medical attention. Sometimes one may even think it's easier for them to go to Abia to access medical assistance. So apart from the numerous benefits of the Federal Medical Center,
the need to assess it is of paramount importance. And because of the location of this area, Ewuteda, because of not just the distance, but the topography of the area, has made it very, very difficult for people to access any facility. The topography is terrible. I therefore wish to ask my colleague to support this very important debate, that it should be given accelerated attention for a second reading, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Senator Koneke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Senator Akoni Yarain, representing Akwa Ibom South Senatorial District. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I stand to commend my colleague, Senator Naji, for bringing up this bill, seeking for provision of medical center for his people, his constituents. Mr. President, provision of good health facility in any community cannot be overemphasized, because we all know that health is life and health is wealth. When the people have the free access to good medical facility, they will live a good life, and the community will definitely experience development. The provision or approval of this bill will give the people access to the quality medical treatment that every Nigerian requires. It's a necessity. And also, the most important thing is that the bill is seeking for upgrade of an existing facility, and therefore the financial implication or the amount requested for will not be too much for the government to invest to help the people of this community. Mr. President, apart from the Owutu Eda community, the proximity of the hospital, the medical center, to the neighboring states of Abia will also help the hospital to function very well and will serve a larger population. I therefore wish to join my other colleagues in supporting this bill to be read the second time. Thank you.
Is there anybody against the bill? Those in favor that the bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to provide for the legal framework to establish a federal medical center, Ewute Eda, and for related matters 2020, SB 295, second reading.
A bill for an act to provide for the legal framework to establish the Federal Medical Center, Ewute Eda, and for related matters 2020, second reading taken, and the bill is referred to the Senate Committee on Health, Secondary and Tertiary to report by within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day is the second reading of Integrated Rural Development Agency Establishment Bill 2020. This bill has been sponsored by Senator Stella Adeze Odua, who has come before me that with your permission, the bill, the second reading will be stepped down to another legislative day. So I would like to move a motion, for this Senate to consider moving this second reading debate to another legislative day.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask to second the motion as well.
Those in favor that the consideration of the bill be stood down till another legislature will say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, the fifth order of the day is the presentation and consideration of the report of the Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund on the Federal University of Environment Technology, SAT-Perua, Tai, Ogoni River State Establishment Bill 2020. Distinguished senators will recall that the bills were referred to the committee on Wednesday, 19 February 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Toli Odebi, who is representing distinguished Senator Ahmed Babak Keita, who is the chairman of the committee, to move a motion for the presentation and consideration of the report.
Senator Tolu Odebi.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Tolu Odebi, representing Ogun West. Mr. President, permit me to present to the Senate today two reports on the Committee on Tertiary Institutions on TED Fund. On behalf of my chairman, Mr. Senator Baba Ahmed Keita. And Mr. President, if you permit me, I would like to take the two reports concurrently.
Okay, may proceed.
Sorry, the first report, Mr. President, is a report from the Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund on a bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Environmental Technology, Sapewa Ogoni Establishment Bill 2020 SB 200. And to save time, Mr. President, I'll just go straight to the legislative summary, the observations and the recommendations. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, at this juncture, I wish to inform you that the committee has critically scrutinized the provisions of the bill vis-à-vis presentations made by the stakeholders. Accordingly, the committee also carried out various amendments on the bill, which range from editorial corrections and redraft of some provisions to conform with the normative standard in the legislative drafting styles. Observations and findings. From the views canvassed by stakeholders of the public hearing and subsequent analysis of the presentations, the committee hereby makes the following observations and findings. That, 1, the stakeholders who made both written and oral submissions of the public hearing unequivocally submitted the passage of the bill by the National Assembly. 2, the establishment of the university will no doubt provide the much-needed manpower to meet the required needs of Nigeria in the areas of environment and technology, as well as provide the conducive and enabling environment for graduates from the university to compete favorably with other counterparts on technological and environmental issues globally. And 3, the knowledge and skills that will be acquired by graduates from the proposed university will go a long way in expanding and deepening the range of patriotism and contributions to national integration and progress by the young people of this country. Hence, the need for the Senate to consider and approve this legislative proposal. Recommendation. The Senate Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund, which this bill was referred to, having carefully considered, hereby recommends as follows. That the Senate do consider and pass the Federal University of Environmental Technology, Sapewa Establishment, etc. Bill 2020 as amended. Conclusion, I wish to use this opportunity to present to the Senate to consider the report on the Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund on the Federal University of Environmental Technology, Sapewa, Tai, Ogoni Rivers Establishment Bill 2020 SB 200. And the other report, Mr. President, is for the establishment, is also from the Committee on Tertiary Institutions, and the committee is for the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, Okeogun, and for other matters connected therein, 2019 SB 159. I'll also go to the legislative summary and findings, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I wish to inform you that the committee has also critically scrutinized the provisions of this bill vis-à-vis the presentations made by the stakeholders. Accordingly, the committee also carried out the various amendments on the bill, which range from editorial corrections and redraft of some provisions to conform with the normative standard and legislative drafting styles. Our findings are as follows. From the views canvassed by stakeholders and members of the public at the public hearing and the subsequent analyses of the presentations, the committee hereby makes the following observations. 1. That the stakeholders who made both written and oral submissions of the public hearing unequivocally supported the passage of the bill by the National Assembly. 2. That the establishment of the university will in no doubt provide the much needed power to meet the required needs of the technological and agricultural sector, as well as provide conducive and enabling environment for the graduates for the university to compete favorably with other counterparts on technological and agricultural issues globally. Number 3, the knowledge and skills that will be acquired by graduates for the proposed university will go a long way in expanding and deepening the range of patriotism and contribution to national integration and progress by the young people of this country. Hence, the need for the Senate to consider and approve the legislative proposal. Our recommendation. The Senate Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund, which this bill was referred to, having carefully considered the same hereby recommends as follows. That the Senate do consider and pass the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, Okyogo, Establishment Bill 2020 as amended. Conclusion. I wish to use this opportunity to thank the President of the Senate, my able and distinguished colleagues for the opportunity to serve and to present this in this capacity, and to humbly request the Senate to pass this bill. Signed, Senator Ahmed Baba Keita. Thank you.
I need someone to second the presentation of the two reports. Senator Abo.
Mr. President, my name is Senator Shako Abo. I rise to second the motions, the bills, please. Thank you.
Those in favor that we receive the report, we consider the report of our Committee on Tertiary Education and Third Fund, say aye. Those against, any, the ayes have it. Any comments? Leader of the Senate, Committee of the Whole.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate do resolve into Committee of the Whole to consider this report. I so move.
Minority Leader.
And I rise to second the motion as moved.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate resolves into Committee of the Whole to consider the reports clause by clause, say aye. Those against, any, the ayes have it. These are not controversial bills, they are just for establishment of institutions, and each has 28 clauses, so I'll be a bit fast so that we're able to. We'll start with Federal University of Environmental Technology, Sapia, Tai Ogoni, River State. Those in favor that clauses 1 to 5 stand part of the bill, say aye. Those against, any, the ayes have it. Those in favor that clauses 6 to 10 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clauses 11 to 15 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clauses 16 to 20 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clauses 20 to 25. Those in favor that those clauses stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clauses 26 to 28 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that schedules 1 to 3, those in favor that paragraphs 1 to 3 stand part of the schedule say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Explanatory memorandum. Those in favor that the explanatory memorandum stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The short title. Those in favor that the short title stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The long title. Those in favor that the long title on page 1 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate. The second one, the next one is Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, Oke Ogun, Oyo State. Those in favor that clauses 1 to 5 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clauses 6 to 10 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clauses 11 to 15 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of clauses 16 to 20 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of clauses 21 to 25 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clauses 22 to 28. Those in favor of those clauses stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the paragraphs 1 to 2 stands part of the schedule say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the explanatory memorandum on page 40 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the short title stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the long title stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate. Plenary.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I move that the chair reports progress. I so move.
Minority Leader, use your mic, please.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I second the motion that the chair report progress in plenary.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the chair reports progress, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, the Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the report of the Committee on Tertiary Institutions and Third Fund on the Federal University of Environmental Technology, Sakpewa Tai Ogoni, Rivers State Establishment Bill 2020, and approved as follows. Clauses 1 to 27 as recommended, Schedules 1 to 3 as recommended, explanatory memorandum as recommended, short title as recommended, long title as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. The Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the report of the Committee on Tertiary Institutions and Third Fund on the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, OK Ogun, Oyo State Establishment Bill 2020, and also approved as follows. Clauses 1 to 27 as recommended, Schedules 1 as recommended, explanatory memorandum as recommended, short title as recommended, long title as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I rise to move the motion that the Federal University of Environmental Technology, Sakperwa Tai Ogoni, River State Establishment Bill be now read the third time.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that this bill be now read a third time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Environment Technology, Sakpenwa Ogoni, and for other matters connected there with 2020, SB 200, third reading.
A bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Environment Technology, Sakpenwa. This name keeps on changing. In another place, it's Sakperwa with R, another one with N. Which one is correct? N, not R. N. Okay. So, Secretary, take note, please, because there is variation. A bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Environment Technology, Sakpenwa Ogoni, and for other matters connected there with 2020, third reading taken, and the bill is passed. Congratulations. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I rise to move a motion that the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, OK Ogun, Oyo State Establishment Bill be now read the third time. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that this bill be now read a third time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, or KOGUN, and for other related matters thereof, 2020 SB 159, third reading.
A bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, or KOGUN, and for other related matters thereof, 2020, third reading taken, and the bill is passed. Congratulations. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I would like to come first under Order 44 in order to revise the order of precedence in the motions that we have to facilitate the travel time of some of our colleagues who have to go to Lagos. In that respect, I would like to move a motion for us to take the first motion to be taken will be the motion to be presented by distinguished Senator Gabriel Suswam on the restoration of the two state constituencies from Ushongo State Constituency of Benue, and further approve the restoration of Agasha State Constituency from Guma State Constituency in compliance with the decisions of the court and Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So first, I would like to move the motion for this Senate to allow this particular motion to be taken in the first order of precedence for the motion to be presented. So I so move a motion.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that we allow the leader to reorder the standing order, what do you call it? Leader, the order paper, right? To reorder the order paper by suspending our the 44, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Okay, Leader. Leader, you have to move that.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I rise to move the third one. Yes, that is the seventh order of the day is a motion standing in the name of distinguished Senator Gabriel Suswam on the approval for the restoration of the two state constituencies from Ushongo State Constituency of Benue State, and further approve the restoration of Agasha State Constituency from Guma State Constituency in compliance with the decision of the courts and Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Gabriel Suswam to move the motion.
Senator Gabriel Suswam.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Mr. President, let me first state that myself, the senators from Benue, and the entire people of Benue have not taken this magnanimity by your leadership for granted, reordering the order paper to our commendators. I want to express the gratitude of the Benue people to you as our leader and the leadership of the Senate. Mr. President, the motion seeks for the approval for the restoration of two state constituencies from Ushongo State Constituency of Benue State and the restoration of Agasha State Constituency from Guma State Constituency in compliance with the decisions of the courts and Section 115 of the Constitution. Mr. President, the Senate to note the decision of the Federal High Court Abuja on the 13th of January 2005 in the case of Ushongo Local Government versus INEC, suit number as stated, which ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission to restore the suppressed matter and Bagua State constituencies in Ushongo Local Government area of Benue State. Further note the decisions of the Supreme Court on the 10th of October 2018, the case of INEC versus Guma local government and two others, suit number of the Supreme Court stated, wherein the Appellate Court affirmed the decision of the Court of Appeal delivered on 16 June 2015, suit number stated on the immediate restoration of Agacha State constituency in Guma local government of Benue State. Recall that sequel to the said decisions of the Federal High Court and that of the Supreme Court on the restoration of the Mata, Bagua, and Agacha State constituency respectively, and upon the request of INEC, the House of Representatives and the Senate on 14th of May 2019, May 21, 2019, and May 28, 2019, at the twilight of the 8th National Assembly, respectively, passed a concurrent resolution unanimously approving the restoration of the two state constituencies of Mata and Bagua from Oshongu State and the restoration of Agacha State constituency from Guma local government area of Benue State. In compliance with the orders of the court and the provisions of Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. Recall further that due to the dissolution of the 8th National Assembly, a concurrent resolution on the restoration of the two suppressed state constituencies from Oshongu State constituency and the restoration of Agacha State constituency from Guma local government could not be transmitted to INEC for implementation, hence the need for another resolution to approve the exercise as ordered by the courts and in compliance with Section 91 and Section 115 of the 1919 Constitution as amended. Observe that the delay in complying with the order of the Federal High Court in suit number as stated 2004 and that of the Supreme Court in suit number as stated on the restoration of Mata and Bagua State constituency from Oshongu State constituency and Agacha State constituency from Guma State constituency of Benue State is a serious constitutional aberration against the spirit of Section 91 and 115 of the 1999 Nigerian Constitution and has over the years unjustly denied the people of Mata, Bagua, and Agacha of their due representation in the Benue State House of Assembly. Accordingly, resolved to approve the restoration of Mata State constituency from Oshongu State constituency as directed by the Federal High Court, comprising Ikov, Bagba, Bagwaza, Baye, and Utange. Approve the restoration of Bagua State constituency from Oshongu State constituency as directed by the Federal High Court, comprising Atikesi, Lese, Baka, Banyam, Bawe, and Bakuwa. Approve the restoration of Agacha State constituency by altering the boundaries of the current Guma State constituency to create two state constituency, namely Agacha State constituency comprising Sai, Nzoro, Kambe, and Abinsi council wards, and Guma State constituency comprising Uvi, Baduem, Babai, Bawa, Niev, and Baye Stroke, Yandev council wards. Direct the Independent National Electoral Commission to comply with this resolution to ensure the restoration of Mata, Bagua State constituency from Oshongu State constituency and restoration of Agacha State constituency from Guma State constituency to be effected in the next House of Assembly election after the current life of the Benue State House of Assembly in compliance with Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended. Seek the concurrence of the House of Representatives in line with Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. Mr. President, honorable colleagues, this motion is straightforward as stated. In 2005, the Mata Bagua constituency was created, and in 2018, that of Agacha and Guma were created. All of this was approved here in the Senate and in the House, unfortunately, as stated, they were not able to transmit on time. Why INEC had prepared to conduct election there, they suddenly realized that they didn't have the powers to do that until the resolutions of the National Assembly was passed on to them. But because the life of the 8th Assembly came to an end and this was not transmitted, all we seek to do here is to bring that back and pass it so that we can transmit it on time, so that in 2023, while INEC are conducting the next election, this will be incorporated. And so, Mr. President, finally, just to remind Mr. President that he was even the one who moved the motion the last time when I wasn't here. So, Mr. President, in the 8th Assembly moved this, then he was the leader of the Senate. He was the one who moved for the concurrence of this resolution. And so, Mr. President, I present the case of the Benue people as it affects these two state constituencies. Mr. President, I so present.
Senator Okeje.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, Jeff, I represent Benue Northwest. I stand to second the motion as eloquently and ably presented by Senator Susan. Mr. President, we needn't have come this far as this issue is concerned. As he highlighted graphically in the motion, the struggle has been on for quite a while. Apart from what the court did, I was then in the House of Representatives, and from that end, the motion was passed. It was passed from this side. And of course, in the case of the second one, we have the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, giving the order for the restoration of this constituency. And yet, we are here today, having missed the last election in respect to these two constituencies. Now, I think the proper and appropriate thing should be done so that the next elections, these people will be captured, these state constituencies will be captured, and we won't have to be, go on and on over something that the highest court in the land has given its note of approval. Of course, this is not unconstitutional. And so I ask my colleagues to join us in supporting this motion so that this will be done over with. Thank you.
DSP. DSP.
Thank you, Mr. President of the Omo Agege Delta Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, I rise to lend my voice and my support to the motion ably moved by Governor Suswan. Mr. President, I do so because this motion is very, very timely and very, very apt. Mr. President, all across the length and breadth of this country, we have similar challenges in most of the states. Situations where we had in some cases, two House of Assembly seats, state constituencies in a local government for no reason, Mr. President. One of those constituencies were suppressed by INEC and elections conducted into one state constituency. And when matters were brought before INEC, they always insisted on getting a court order. Mr. President, across the country, we have so many states where court orders, just like Suswan has presented, has been obtained with INEC doing nothing. Mr. President, I was privy in the 8th Senate when this matter was brought to the floor, and as Governor Suswan rightly pointed out, the only reason this was not resolved at the time was because the 8th Senate basically ran out of time. So, Mr. President, what is good for the goose is good for the gander, in a very, very selfish way, for selfish reasons too, because we have a similar situation in my home state. I rise to support this motion as ably moved, while I'm waiting to include that of my state by way of additional prayers. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Abomoro.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Abomoro, representing the good people of the Benue South Senatorial District. Mr. President, I rise to support this motion very ably articulated and presented by my brother, distinguished Senator Gabriel Susuan. Mr. President, there is no doubt that the suppression of these two state constituencies have deprived the people of Ushongo and Guma local governments of effective representation in the Benue State House of Assembly. By the grace of the courts and the magnanimity of this Senate, Mr. President, it is my hope that these two state constituencies will be restored and the people will get their deserved representation in the Benue State House of Assembly. I therefore lend my voice to support this motion and to ask my colleagues to support the motion for the restoration of the Mata State constituency and the Agasha State constituencies in both Guma and Ushongo local government areas. Thank you, Mr. President, and I hope that my colleagues will do the same and support this motion.
Deputy Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues. I rise, Mr. President, to add my voice to this motion that has a very purposeful intentment for promoting broadening democracy. The purpose, Mr. President, is to ensure that representation is widened. And as captured in the motion, Mr. President, I was part of the resolution or the concurrence. And I remember, Mr. President, reflections on some constituencies that had similar challenge and had to go to court, that these matters were addressed. And I think this is quite an opportunity for those areas that have similar issues to be reflected by way of amendment as observed by the Deputy Senate President. And having said this, Mr. President, I want to also add that we have a similar situation in the neighboring Donga Mararaba constituency in Donga 1. We had this constituency that was suppressed by INEC, and the people had to resort to litigation. We made this amendment in the 8th Senate, Mr. President, as observed here. And this opportunity has offered itself for us to also add to this amendment. Mr. President, having said this, I second this, support this motion, and urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there anybody against the motion? Okay, we'll go to the prayers. Prayer 1. Approve the restoration of Mata State constituency from Ushongo State constituency as directed by the Federal High Court comprising Ikof, Mbakwa, Mbagwaza, Mbaye, Anwa. Is that the correct spelling of the fifth one? Uyang? Uyang? Tangu? But there's no T there. We will better correct it because there will be difficulty. UT. Utang. Okay. Utangi. So those in favor of this prayer 1 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Please, Secretary, take note of that spelling. Prayer 2, approve the restoration of Mbawa State Constituency from Ushongo State Constituency as directed by the Federal High Court comprising of Atiese, Atikese, Lesser, Mbaka, Mbaya, Mbawe, and Mbakwa. Those in favor of prayer 2 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 3, approve the restoration of Agasha State Constituency by altering the boundaries of the current Guma State Constituency to create 2 state constituencies, namely Agasha State Constituency comprising Sagev, Ndorovo, Nzorov, Kambi, and Abinsi Council wards, and Guma State constituency comprising Ovir, Mbadwem, Mbabai, Mbawa, Niev, and Mba Yandev council wards. Those in favor of Prayer 3 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 4, direct the Independent National Electoral Commission to comply with this resolution to ensure the restoration of Mata and Mbawa state constituencies from Ushongo State constituency and the restoration of Agasha State constituency from Guma State constituency to be effected in the next state houses or assembly election after the current life of the Benue State House or Assembly in compliance with Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. And prayer 5, seek the concurrence of the House of Representatives in line with Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader. Extension of time.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, have come this far and with some 3 more motions to go, I rise to ask for the suspension of our Order 13 in order to extend the time, conclude deliberations on this.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion this morning.
Those in favor that we suspend our Order 13 to enable us to sit beyond 2 o'clock say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Deputy Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The additional prayer, Mr. President, is to include restoration of Donga 2 State constituency out of present Donga 1 constituency to include the following wards: Maraba Ward, Gayama Ward, Kumbo Ward, Nyitan Ward, to be known as Donga 2 State constituency, as was amended in the ex-Senate.
I will seek interpretation here, because this motion is on the basis of court ruling. Can we here just add other constituencies to be created without similar court? Those of us who are lawyers, no, I just want some guidance. Those of us are DSP.
With all due respect, Mr. President, I'm not so sure we can do that absent a court order. The predicate for Senator Suswans, is because there's a court order, which court order was not obeyed by INEC unless and until there is a resolution of both chambers of the National Assembly. That's the predicate. And I like to believe that in the absence of that, I'm not so sure, at this time, without further legal research,
Yeah. That's this is my worry. I'm not too clear about it. Leader.
Mr. President, I rise actually to concur, even though I'm not a lawyer, but to concur with the position of the Deputy Senate President. Because the reason why INEC refused to act on the court order is that in accordance with the normal processes and procedures, a resolution of both chambers of the National Assembly is required for INEC to enforce the orders of the court. And at the point when the resolutions were made in the last Senate, due to the fact that the Senate was winding up, so that particular resolution in both the 2 chambers was not consummated. So it was on that basis that we are reintroducing these issues again. So any other amendment to the prayers that have been raised by the distinguished Senator Suswam has to be also, in tandem with the court order that ordered that variation, so that we can get INEC to offer the normal procedure. So the position of the Senate President is in order.
Okay, Deputy Minority Leader.
Mr. President, there is what we call a precedence, because there are other court orders that were in the wings that were waiting. And since this, we've had the opportunity to implement this, those court orders that were not obeyed can follow suit, and meaning a precedent had been set. So we have the powers to implement this if there are existing court orders in respect of a similar case that had been there. Yes, Yes, that is what.
Do you have a court order asking for INEC to implement this particular amendment here you are bringing?
Mr. President will produce it. Of course, INEC will not implement it without showing proof of that court order.
No, but the court order is supposed to go to INEC, isn't it? Where is the court order supposed to go? So do we have a court order now?
It is INEC that will request the production of this court order before implementation. So if this is passed, it makes it easier for INEC to ask for the court order.
Senator Abdullah.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to add my voice in support of the submission by distinguished Deputy Senate President. The fact of the matter is the motion we are working on was predicated on a court order, and that court order has been made very clear to us in the course of processing this motion. There is nothing wrong with what the deputy minority wants us to do, but if he has got any authority, the court, it should come under a separate motion altogether. It should come under a separate motion altogether, and then it can be taken on its merit.
Yeah, I think, Deputy Minority Leader, I think the intervention by Senator Abdullah Adamu clears this thing. You don't have to come under an additional prayer. Just like Senator Suswam brought his motion with all the necessary references, you can do that even tomorrow. Yes, just get the court orders and then we look at it and then we can take it. So any additional prayer, DSP?
Mr. President, additional prayers. In the interest of legislative economy and in light of the fact that the motion, the extant motion, is predicated on judicial pronouncement. Mine is also predicated on judicial pronouncement. And as a consequence of that, Mr. President, I ask, one, that the Senate approve the restoration of Sapele urban state. Wait. You have no court order. I do. Let me finish my praise. I'm sorry. That the Senate approve the restoration of Sapele urban state constituency from the current Sapele state constituency as directed by the Federal High Court Warri judgment, would in effect now mean Sapele should now have Sapele urban state constituency and Sapele rural state constituency. This is the court order. 2, Mr. President, approve the restoration of Ethiop East State Constituency 2, consisting of Abraka clan and Eku from the current Ethiop East State Constituency as directed by the Federal High Court Warri Court judgment. In effect, Mr. President, we have, as directed by the court, Ethiop East Constituency 1 and Ethiop East State Constituency 2. And 3, borrowing from Governor Suswan, direct INEC to comply with this resolution to ensure the restoration of these 2 state constituencies, Mr. President, in compliance with Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. And finally, Mr. President, to seek the concurrence of the House of Representatives in line with Section 115 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. I so move, Mr. President.
Senator Abdullah.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we are dealing with the same situation or settings. The fact that the Sapele issue was driven from the ruling of a court does not preclude the fact that it is a completely separate judicial process that produced the decision of Sepele as that one that produced the one we're talking about from Benue. That of Benue is before these hollow chambers through due process. I have no problem Sepele getting what they want to do, what they want to get, or what the gentleman from our gentle colleague from Taraba want to get. But the fact of the matter is, they should not seek to benefit from what they didn't, reap what they haven't sown. They have to come properly before the chambers.
Senator Sabi.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The point I just want to raise here is that when it comes to matters like this, processes and procedure are key. And the fact that you are already mentioning court process means that anybody can also take us to the court if he's not satisfied with what we have done. And the only thing that can make us to stand the test of such kind of situation is where our processes are unassailable. And I think while I agree that yes, precedents can be set, but that precedent should give you a stronger background upon which you should now come up with a fresh motion carrying the same subject matter, so that both in our Hansard and our record of proceedings, these things will be properly captured as to the genesis and the body explaining how we arrive at that decision. Because a motion naturally is to spell out the title, what you actually want to say in terms of the background to the subject matter before you come to your prayers, which is very convincing. So I think what I would rather want to suggest is for these two cases we have, we should rather give them the opportunity to come with fresh motions on their own grounds, so that when it is approved, we know that yes, that thing is approved. And of course, when we are to make any references, the reference will be very clear and unambiguous, because there are different states that we shouldn't forget, different constituencies that we shouldn't forget. So I think not to complicate matters, it will be better the Deputy Senate President is asked to come up with a different motion, and then the Deputy Minority Leader should also come with a different motion, stating the case as it were, and then asking for these prayers explicitly.
DSP, you read, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will yield to the best judgment of the bench. But I haven't said that, Mr. President. Let me say this. Of the chair. Yes. But, Mr. President, I haven't said that. We should not compare apples with oranges. The situation, as earlier explained, with respect to the Taraba case, the Taraba constituencies have not been judicially pronounced upon by the courts. The Delta cases, Mr. President, have been judicially pronounced upon by the courts. Mr. President, by our rules, no, you said so. Yes. By our rules here, nothing has ever stopped us from bringing additional prayers. We've had situations in these chambers where there has been motions brought to address issues of flooding in states otherwise named in the motion. But by way of additional prayer, because of the similarity of injuries, we be permitted to bring other states by way of additional prayers. But if the chair were to rule otherwise, I can live with that. I only said this, that it would be good that in the interest of legislative economy to save time, considering that all of the issues are the same. The issues are the same, and they are germane. And that is why, Mr. President, I said, but if you rule otherwise, I can live with it and come with a proper and different motion. Let me not say proper, but a different motion. Thank you, Mr.
Senate Leader.
Mr. President, while I have due respect, respectively, understand the position of the Deputy Senate President, I think the issue that has been laid out very clearly by the Secretary Abdullahi Adamu and the Chief Whip are very important here. And for the following reasons. when you take the title of this motion, you can compare it with the issue of flooding, because flooding is the general title. So if you add other states, it wouldn't change the meaning of flooding. Take the title of distinguished Senator Susuam's motion. Approval for the restoration of two state constituency in Oshongo State constituency in Benue State and restoration of Agasha from Guma State compliant with cost. It mentioned the constituencies and the state. Anything that is going for a resolution to the INEC is going to carry the title of this motion. That's one. Which does not carry the title of Delta State or Taraba State. So it could mix up issues unnecessarily. The second issue that we should note, Mr. President, is that the single senator from Benue copiously, I say copiously, noted the reference numbers of the court judgments that were involved. In this case, FSC ABJ CS 562204. And then he even went on all the cases he mentioned, the reference of the court judgments that were effected. Now, this is to guide the INEC to know that these court judgments are not there. They are there. If they go through their files or the court files, they can find them, as appropriate. So for us to include other prayers now, that do not quote this kind of particular references, is going to complicate matters for us. So I don't really see any difficulty in this matter. For the two issues raised by the deputy leader of the minority and our distinguished deputy Senate President, to come with simple motions tomorrow so that we can do the same, quoting the relevant kind of thing, and get them passed without having to do a prayer. I respectfully submit.
Thank you, Leader. This is my understanding. First, let me say, what? Point of order? Yes. Okay, this is okay. Your point of order is noted. My understanding is this: the positions canvassed by Senator Abdullah Adamu, the Deputy Chief Whip, and the Senate Leader, in summary, is what I think this Senate should go with. And my opinion is we have processes here in the Senate. Even if there is a court ruling, we need to be given the court ruling. Because we just cannot quote something like this without knowing. I presented this motion in the 8th Assembly because there was something given to me. If we are taking a motion like this, of this significance, because these are serious consequences, then even the court judgment or ruling need to be available to us at least, so that we're able to verify and then take the motion. So for me, like the people I mentioned, or the distinguished colleagues I mentioned, said, DSP, you can come with their own motion. Let them be separate motions, actually, not yours and Taraba combined. Because these are, even for ease of documentation by ANEC, so that if you have this thing tomorrow, we can take them. But I agree we should not treat this motion like we treat other motions or other prayers. When there's a bad road in Kogi, I will also say, I have a bad road in Yobe, then we add. This bring your motion. This is a little bit different. So I will rule that we leave the resolutions sought by Senator Susuam in the motion as they are, without these additional recommendations or prayers. And then we take new separate motions, even if they are coming tomorrow so that we can send them to INEC almost at the same time. Is that okay? So any additional prayer? Thank you very much. Congratulations, Susam. Leader of the Senate. Senator Baraj.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Senator Baraj Jibrin, I represent Kano North. Mr. President, I have Senator Ahmed Babakaita as a co-sponsor of this motion because the road passes his senatorial zone also. And just of recent, Senator Kabir Brekia also indicated his desire to be joined as a co-sponsor. Mr. President, with the permission, I read the motion as follows. That the Senate knows that the road infrastructure is very critical for economic and commercial development of any developing economy. Further knows that the Kano Ambata Kazauri Daura to Niger border road is a very important gateway that connects the northwestern part of the country to the neighboring Niger Republic. That the Senate observed that the volume of traffic on the road has led to congestion, thereby slowing down the free flow of vehicular movement and has become a source of worry to drivers and commuters alike. Concerned that the travel time on the road has tripled owing to the narrow nature of the road, with its attendant traffic resulting in a slowdown of commercial activities as well as movement of goods. Disturbed that armed robbers taking advantage of the narrowness and non-dualization of the road have become a law unto themselves by ambushing, robbing, dispossessing, and killing commuters at will. Knows that the state of the road requires immediate reconstruction and dualization to reduce the unacceptable level of accidents and robbery on the road, and knows that the importance of the road lies not only in the fact that it's a gateway to a neighboring country, but also of its importance as a commercial, agricultural, and other economic viability, especially the evacuation of agricultural and industrial produce, which these cities have in abundance. Accordingly resolves to 1, all the Federal Ministry of Works to designate the road for immediate reconstruction and dualization. And 2, urge the federal government to allocate adequate funds in the 2021 budget currently being prepared for the reconstruction and dualization of the Kano Dambata Kazauri Daura road to the Niger border. Mr. President, I so submit. Thank you.
Senator Kabir.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I'm Kabir Gaya, representing the people of Kano South from Kano State. Mr. President, I second the motion ably moved by Senator Baraj Jibrin on the issue of this important road
leading from Kano, Ambata, Kazauri to Daura, which link into the Niger border. Mr. President, this road is a major road that links Kano or all the other states joining to Kano to go to Niger. It's a business road, it's a road for commercial users, and I think even after dualizing this road, if the toll gate is put on that road, that's one of the Bible roads that you can recover funds on that project. It was included in the 2019 budget. Unfortunately, the funding was very low. The project could not start. And the 2020 budget was also included. The funding was so low. And that's why I agree with Senator Barrow on trying to improve the funding of this road because of the importance of the road. I believe, Mr. President, if we make this, if we approve his prayers and funds are put on that budget for 2021, I think the people of Kano State, the Katsina State, and all other people that are using this road will be very happy that the road is being improved and dualized for the easy assessment. And for those who are doing robbery on the road, it will be very difficult for them because the road will be free for movement. So I therefore second the motion and heavily support the prayers on this road. Thank you very much.
Senator Ahmed Abakata.
Thank you, Mr. President. I remain Ahmed Babaketa, representing Katsina North. Mr. President, the impact of this road, if constructed, would be significant to the economy of the northern Nigeria and Nigeria as a whole. Mr. President, that road is a very, very important road in terms of transportation of goods and product from within those states and even beyond in Niger Republic. For example, on daily basis we have over 10 to 20, 30, 40 trucks on daily basis lifting cows from Meadua Market, Dambata, and surrounding areas to various parts of the country. And every time we have a small incident of just accident, mostly minor accident, you will see how disruptive it becomes. From Daura to Kano, you can spend so many hours just to get to either of these places. So if infrastructure is for development, and if we want to really help our people, that road is one key road that we have to concentrate on. I just can't understand what happened during the 2019 budget, how it just got thrown out and nothing was done about it. I remember the Katsina elders came in large numbers, mostly retired public servants and traditional chiefs, to solicit with the Federal Minister of Work, Mr. Fashola, and to ask him why the road has not commenced. Because it's one sensitive road that connects Jigawa, Katsina, Kano, and various local governments around there. And mostly these are the agricultural producing areas of that state, of those states. And it is a route, historically, that's part of where we have trans-Saharan trade from Niger down to other countries. And still, it serves as one of the major export and import route for the federal government. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I want to kindly solicit your cooperation in this regard to please help us develop that road and make allocation for it at least in 2021 so that we make it, we realize this road. Let us not forget that that lack of movement that we experience is among the people, again, aggravating the security of those areas. We have always come and discussed security. Even yesterday, we were on a very important topic of that security. And that route, because of its narrowness and because of the volume of traffic, whenever there is any traffic incident, we end up having security challenges again. There will be robberies, there will be kidnappings, and so on and so forth. So having a very smooth road will automatically have an impact on the security of the area too. So these are already some senior senators have already discussed on this issue, but we are appealing to the Senate and Mr. President to please intervene in letting us have this road that would economically impact on Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to the prayers. Is there anybody against the motion? Are you against the motion? Okay. Senator Barkia.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Let me first of all commend the presenter of this. No, I'm not against, sir. I want to comment. Maybe you didn't hear. I say I want to comment. Okay. So let me commend, of course, the presenter of this motion. And, of course, to highlight three important things, apart from what the presenter highlighted in his motion. First of all, proportionally, when the traffic volume of a road increased to 50% within the period of 10 years, that road is automatically due for dualization. And if you look at this Kano-Daura-Kongolam road in Niger Republic, within the last 10 years, the traffic not only doubled but tripled. Therefore, automatically, Mr. President, this road is qualified for dualization. And secondly, of course, if we look at Kano, being the commercial center of Northwest and also northern part of the country in general, definitely this road also deserves to be dualized because of the interaction of Niger Republic businessmen and that of Kano. So I think from all indications that really I support this bill for this road to be dualized. Thank you, Mr. President and distinguished President.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the prayers. Prayer 1, urge the Federal Minister of Works to designate the road for immediate reconstruction and dualization. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against any, the ayes have. Prayer 2, I want to ask a question first. You say urge the federal government to allocate adequate funds in the 2020 budget. Sorry? Yeah, it's the same thing. 2020, this is 2020. But there is no correction here, even the one you gave him is still in 2020. Or you corrected during the something. Okay. Let me read what you sent. Urge the federal government to allocate adequate funds in the 2020 budget currently being prepared. That is supposed to be 2021. But who sent this?
Right. Sir, when I was reading, I made the correction. But, yeah.
So 2021. Okay. Urge the federal government to allocate adequate funds in the 2021 budget currently being prepared for the reconstruction and dualization of the Kano, Dambata, Kazaure, Daura Road to the Niger border. But are you sure there will be adequate funds?
Sir, it's a prayer. We don't know. Anything can happen, sir. Just a prayer. We are praying.
And the budget is before us. Oh, okay. Anything can happen. Okay, so those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have. Thank you very much. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the ninth order of the day is a motion standing in the name of distinguished Senator Adegi Eremi Bayo Barakuma on the urgent need for priority attention and completion of the Yenegua, Okaki, Kolo, Nembe, Brass Road in Bayelsa State. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Tungu Senator Degi Eremia Yobio Barakuma to move the motion.
Senator Degi Barakuma.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Degi Eremia. I represent Bayelsa East Senatorial District. The Senate notes that the federal government of Nigeria has had the Yenegwe or Kake Kolo Nembe Brass Road project on the drawing board from the colonial era and eventually appropriated funds for its construction in the 1973 budget proposal coded F227. Aware that the Yenegwe Okake Kolo Nembe Brass Road alignment leads to communities such as Ogbea, Nembe Basambri, Nembe Ogbolomambri, Okpoma, Tuombras, Egwema, etc. in Ogbea, Nembe, and Brass local government areas respectively. Further aware that these communities play host to federal government oil and gas critical assets of strategic national economic interests. Reminded specifically of the presence of Nigeria Ajib Oil Company, multi-billion dollars oil export terminal and tank farm, as well as Brass LNG project, the multi-billion dollars Brass fertilizer and petrochemical project in and around Brass Island besides Oloibri, Basambri, Santa Barbara, Nembe Creek, SPDC oil fields, all located along the main alignment of this road. Note that Brass Oil and Gas City project is proposed to position Nigeria as a leading hub for downstream oil and gas industrial and manufacturing activities in Africa and the world. And Brass is a terminal location of the Yenegwe or Kake Kolo Nembe Brass Road. Worried that absence of road in this area had negatively affected our foreign exchange earnings and national revenue. The fluctuations in oil production is attributable, among other factors, to the complex challenges bordering on surveillance and security of pipelines and other oil installations located in the swampy mangrove terrain with crisscrossing rivulets, tributaries, rivers, and large bodies of water which empty into the Atlantic Ocean. This situation has implication of threats to our national security. Further worried that the federal government loses several millions of petrodollars on account of the non-completion of the Yenegwe or Kake Kolo Nembe Brass Road. Disturbed that over the years, the attention of government and occasional paltry budgetary provisions had never matched the socio-economic value derivable from the road when completed. Apparently, the 535,800,000 naira provided in the project, by the Federal Ministry of Works in the 2020 budget can be likened to a drop of water in an ocean. And convinced that if this road is given priority attention and completed, it will serve as a main supply route to the Nigerian naval base at Egwema and other military formations on the alignment of this road, with the strategic benefits of effectively enforcing coordinated surveillance and security
in the central Niger Delta region, where major oil and gas national critical assets are situated. Accordingly, resolved to 1. Commend the federal government on efforts at building and maintaining critical road infrastructure in various regions of the country. 2. Urge the federal government through the Federal Ministry of Works to make adequate provision in the 2021 budget to expeditiously execute the Yenegwe, Okake, Kolo, Nembe Brass Road with the aim of completing it before the end of 2023, all things being equal. And 3, urge the federal government to classify the Yenegwe, Okake, Kolo, Nembe Brass Road as a top priority project deserving possible external funding for national economic interest and national security. Mr. President, I want to commend you for your tactfulness and competence in managing time of the affairs of the Senate. This motion has been pending for several months now, but because of your ability to manage time today, the motion has been taken. I want to thank you for that and urge my colleagues to support this motion to enable us promote our national security and accelerate economic development. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I need a second. Okay, Senator Francis Ali Mekena.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Francis Ali Mekena, representing the good people of Edo North. Mr. President, the Civil College, I rise to support this motion ably moved by my distinguished Senator Odegi. This road is understatement to say if it's completed, it will add to the economic value of that people surrounding that area. Mr. President, in that region, you know, it is a swampy area. We went there, was it 2 years ago, where we have the LNG. If the road is completed, even the community around area will benefit. And if it will enhance them to bring their crop to the market, and it will also enhance the security of that area. Because right now, to police that area is a very swampy area that will make it difficult for the military to penetrate if there is no road. So I rise to support this motion, ably moved by that the road should be given priority and it should be supported and by the government. Thank you, Mr. President.
We'll go to the prayers. Prayer 1. Commend the federal government on efforts at building and maintaining critical road infrastructure in various regions of the country. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. Prayer 2. Urge the federal government through the Federal Ministry of Works to make adequate provision in the 2021 budget to expeditiously execute the Yenegwe, Okaki, Kolo, Nembe, Brass Road with the aim of completing it before the end of 2023. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. And prayer 3, urge the federal government to classify the Yenegwe, Okaki, Kolo, Nembe, Brass Road as a top priority project deserving possible external funding for national economic interest and security. What is this external funding?
Sorry, external fund, that is by way of borrowing, external borrowing, possibly, because of the importance and the economic importance and security of this project, if completed. It requires external, borrowing, if it is possible.
I don't think we should go to that macro extent that this road is recommended for borrowing, because very soon it will be part of our prayers all through. I think we should just insist on funding. How government does it, let's leave it to government. But if we say borrowing, then we don't know what the plans of government would be. I don't know. I just don't want us to create a precedent where we'll be ending up with all our resolutions calling for government to go and borrow. And then people will not understand what we are doing here.
I I think, Mr. President, you are very right here. I would like, with his permission, to amend the prayer 3 to read, urge the federal government to classify the Enegwe Okaki Kolo Nembe Brass Road as a top priority project. Full stop.
For government funding, like the deputy leader is meeting. Yeah, but I think we should stop at that because we're already borrowing too much and we're being accused of maybe providing the necessary approvals. There's nothing wrong in what we did, but maybe we should not encourage government should be going to borrow and borrow and borrow. If we can find a way of funding our project, we should. So are you okay with amendment by the leader? Deji?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just that one was tempted to make this prayer because of the importance of the projects. Other projects in this country that are probably not as important as these projects are funded through borrowing, even externally. That's why I was tempted to include this part.
So do you want us to put the question as you have worded your this thing, or you want to adopt the amendment by the leader? Okay. I think that's a very wise decision. So those in favor of prayer 3 as amended by the leader and seconded by the deputy Senate leader, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
The 10th and final order of the day is a motion standing in the name of distinguished Senator Abba Moro on the urgent need to deal with the outbreak of a strange ailment said to be yellow fever ravaging Epelo, Otukpa, and Itabano Okupa communities in Ogbadigbo local government area of Benue State. Mr. President, you will recall that on Tuesday, 24th November 2020, the Senate, by Order 42, subsection 2 of our standing order, approved that this motion be moved on the next legislative day, which is today. Accordingly, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Patrick Abamoro to move the motion.
Senator Patrick Abamoro, Benue South.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, Mr. President, my name is Senator Abba Patrick Moro. I represent the very good people of the Benue South Senatorial District of Benue State. Mr. President, as has been rightly pointed out, this motion was raised last week, and because of the nature of the epidemic in our place, as I'm presenting this motion now, Mr. President, the number of deaths arising from the ailment has literally tripled. Yet, Mr. President, I must present this motion before the Senate by your indulgence to bring to the attention of the Nigerian people the devastating effect of the epidemic that is ravaging 2 communities in my constituency. Mr. President, the motion is titled Urgent Need to Deal with the Outbreak of a Strange Ailment Said to be Yellow Fever, ravaging the Epelo, Otukpa, and Itabono, Oupa communities in Ogbadibo local government area of Benue State, sponsored by my humble self. The Senate notes with great pain the outbreak of a strange ailment said to be yellow fever in the Pelo, Otukpa, and Itabono, Oupa communities of Ogbadibo local government area of the Benue South Senatorial District, Benue State, Nigeria. The Senate notes further that the strange ailment has not yet been effectively diagnosed by health authorities, even though the Benue State Ministry of Health and Human Services has been able to intervene to some extent, having collected samples and sent same to National Reference Laboratory to be able to establish the kind of organism that is causing the ailment and is availing the victims of interim treatment. And deeply saddened that people are affected in the rural localities and dying on a daily basis in their numbers, with a Pelo and Itabono communities recording 20 and 25 deaths respectively, while death toll increases hourly and the disease is spreading to Ichama in Okpoku local government area, where 3 deaths have been recorded. Accordingly, the Senate resolves: 1, to urge the Federal Ministry of Health, the National Arbovirus and Vector Research Center to investigate each case and respond to the outbreak. 2, urge the Federal Ministry of Health to mobilize focal persons to the area to quickly complement the efforts of the Benue State government to ascertain the nature of the ailment. 3, urge the Nigerian Center for Disease Control to promptly put up surveillance to contain the disease and see to the treatment of victims and protect others from further contacting it. 4, further urge the Nigerian Center for Disease Control and the Nigerian National Primary Health Care Development Agency to synergize and support the people of Benue South Senatorial District, and in particular the Epelo, Otukwa, and Itabono Ukwa communities to treat, prevent, and or reduce the number of cases and deaths. And 5, further urge the Federal Ministry of Health to immediately activate and set up a multi-agency yellow fever emergency operative center in Benue South should the result come out positive for yellow fever, to conduct mass vaccination and awareness campaigns in the Benue South Senatorial District, being that yellow fever is a completely vaccine-preventable disease, as a single shot of the yellow fever vaccine protects for a lifetime. Mr. President, because of this nature, 3 times now, this type of strange disease has occurred in the Benue South Senatorial District. I've raised motions here, Mr. President, and the motions have been approved by my distinguished colleagues and your humble self. But unfortunately, Mr. President, as I'm talking to you, no intervention has come from anywhere. I therefore ask passionately that at this time, at this defining moment that my people are suffering in their numbers, that this motion be given the necessary support and the compliance committee take urgent steps to ensure that whatever we resolve here is implemented for the benefit of my people. I so move, Mr.
Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Aliu Sabi Abdullahi, Niger North. I want to support this very motion as ably moved by distinguished Comrade Abba Moro. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the country as it is facing the COVID-19 pandemic, and experts have said very rightly that because of the need to pay attention to containing the COVID-19 pandemic, many other health issues will suffer. I think this is a classical case of that scenario. And like you have said, perhaps not enough action has been taken by various institutions of government set up for that purpose. And of course, the danger here again is that you are dealing with a disease condition that is not conclusively known. What is being suggested here is said to be does not confirm that it is yellow fever. If we are dealing with yellow fever, of course, that is a vaccinable disease, as it is being said. But if it is not, then we are also having a pocket of another very serious condition that we must not allow to escalate. So I join in supporting the various resolutions as moved. And of course, when we come to that, we'll look at the details. But suffice it to say that what we need to focus on is beyond this, the various health institutions must take surveillance, sero-monitoring, and other things very seriously. The fact that we are having a COVID-19 pandemic does not mean there are no other disease conditions. And I think experts have warned repeatedly that the tendency is that we focus so much on the containment of COVID-19, and many other people with different other conditions are suffering because, of course, they are not getting attention. So I want to commend the mover of this motion because lives are involved, and our sympathies to those who have lost their life. But what is important is there must be proper investigation into this particular matter so that we'll know exactly what we are dealing with, whether it is still there or it has been contained. Because sometimes you get some disease condition that comes in, takes some people, and of course, if there is no movement, they become, sequestrated within that population, and perhaps with no action taken, you may see it again springing up. So there is need for investigation. With this, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I support this motion, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, sir.
We'll go to the prayers. Urge the Federal Minister of Health, the National Arbovirus and Vector Research Center to investigate each case and respond to outbreaks. Those in favor of prayer 1 say aye. Those against say nay. Prayer 2, urge the Federal Minister of Health to mobilize focal persons to the area to quickly complement the efforts of the Benue State government to ascertain the nature of the ailment. Those in favor of prayer 2 say aye. Those against say nay. Prayer 3, urge the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, to promptly put up surveillance to contain the disease and see to the treatment of victims and protect others from further contacting it. Amendment.
Thank you. When we are talking about containment, you don't talk about surveillance again. I think it's to promptly take action. We remove the surveillance. Say to promptly take action to contain the disease and see to the treatment of victims and protect others from further contracting it. So when you do so, then you have encompassed everything.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Abubakar, representing Borno North. I rise to second the motion to amend prayer 2.
Those in favor of prayer 2 as amended say aye. Those against say nay. Prayer 3, further urge the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, and the National Primary Health Center Development Agency to synergize and support the people of Benue South Senatorial District, and in particular the Epilo, Otukpa, and the Toboni, Okpa communities to treat, prevent, or reduce the number of cases and deaths. Those who have prayer 4 say aye. Those against say nay. And prayer 5, further urge the Federal Minister of Health to immediately activate and set up a multi-agency yellow fever emergency operative center in Benue South, should the result come out positive for yellow fever, to conduct mass vaccination and awareness campaigns in Benue South Senatorial District, being that yellow fever is a completely vaccine-preventable disease, as a single shot of the yellow fever vaccine protects for a lifetime. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. We have, additional prayer, Senator Kwano Ekweni.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Akoneyayi is my name. I want to add as prayer number 6 that urge the federal government to approve a special grant to tackle the strange ailments in research and providing remedial solutions.
Okay. Any seconder? Okay, Senator Francis Fadamsi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to second the additional prayer raised by Senator Akoneyayi.
Those in favor of the additional prayer say aye. Those against say nay. Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. We have come to the end of the plenary for today, and I want to thank all of us who have contributed in all the deliberations of today. With this, the Senate will adjourn till tomorrow, the 3rd day of December 2020 at 10 a.m. prompt. Thank you.